The Magician of the Fairy Tale World. Chapter 1. A long, long time ago, there was a rose kingdom. One day, a little magician named Rhine came to the kingdom's forest. It was said that this magician could make withered flowers bloom again and command harps to play on their own. He was also skilled at concocting magical potions to cure illnesses and heal wounds. Many poor people who couldn't afford medical treatment, if they unfortunately broke a leg or fell ill, would come to the magician for healing. Rhine's herbal medicines were incredibly miraculous. No matter how difficult the illness or how severe the bone fracture, as long as he treated them, they would quickly recover. Thus, Rhine's reputation gradually spread, finally reaching the palace. The king and queen had been married for many years but had no heirs. They yearned for a child but were unable to conceive. At this time, the king heard Rhine's story and summoned the little magician. Sitting in the carriage bound for the palace, the boy looked at his reflection in the glass and couldn't help but fall into memories. Rhine's face was reflected in the glass. The young man was clad in classical robes, his face exquisite and picturesque, looking only 12 or 13 years old. A hood covered his silver hair, and his pale eyes shimmered with a cool light. His skin was so fair it was almost translucent, like a child who had stepped out of a fairy tale book. It's been several years since I came to this world, and my appearance hasn't changed at all. Not only have I become a magician, but have I also become an immortal. Rhine sighed softly. 3 years ago, he arrived in this world, similar to the Middle Ages. A bit of knowledge he brought with him after transmigrating told him that this was a fantasy world, possessing true extraordinary power and almost omnipotent magic. Legend has it that a powerful magician could turn all the people in an entire country into animals with just one spell. It was just like a story from 1001 Nights. And within the kingdom alone, there were more than a dozen powerful witches. They possessed vast supernatural abilities, able to summon wind and rain and call upon nature's spirits to serve them. Fortunately, perhaps because he had done many good deeds in his previous life, Rhine directly became a magician after transmigrating. Transmigrating into a fantasy world and becoming a true magician. Such a perfect beginning made Rhine overjoyed. However, just when Rhine thought he was as powerful as those legendary magicians, he discovered that it wasn't the case at all. The newborn Rhine was incredibly weak. He couldn't fly, summon wind and rain, or even foresee the future. As a magician, his initial magic was extremely faint, only enough to perform a few minor tricks. Besides that, his only skill was concocting magical potions with herbs, just like the wizards and witches in many fairy tales and myths. Fortunately, as a perk of his transmigration, Rhine also learned a method for leveling up. As long as he found the children of destiny, and helped these main characters of fate fulfill their wishes, he could absorb the power of wishes that carried the world's destiny, thereby increasing his magic and gaining new abilities. Of course, even if he couldn't find the children of destiny, simply helping ordinary passers-by fulfill their wishes could also absorb a tiny bit of wish power. However, the effect was greatly reduced, perhaps only 1,000th or 1/10,000th of the efficacy, requiring a particularly large base to see a noticeable improvement. As for what counted as a main character of destiny, Rhine didn't know. Because he didn't know where to find the so-called main characters of destiny, Rhine simply helped others casually, trying to find the legendary main characters of destiny among them. Over these 3 years, he diligently used his expertise, concocting magical potions to treat the illnesses and injuries of the kingdom's people, fulfilling their wish to regain health. A true magician, willing to live in the countryside, treating commoners every day for symbolic, meager compensation. For impoverished patients, he even provided treatment completely free of charge, asking for nothing in return. Such a good deed sounded like a fairy tale, almost unbelievable. Many people were skeptical when they first heard the rumor. It wasn't until they personally witnessed their severely ill family members, after taking Rhine's medicine, recover the next day, that they truly believed and were moved to tears. As one miracle after another of bringing people back to health occurred, Rhine's good name and reputation gradually spread throughout the kingdom. Many people suffering from severe illnesses, even from thousands of miles away, had their families bring them to Rhine's small wooden house, just to take the medicine from this legendary little magician. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. Until today, Rhine's reputation reached the palace, and he was personally summoned by the king. In the bumpy carriage heading to the palace, Rhine turned his palm upward, and a pure white, serene glow slowly emerged, as if it could heal everything. Healing arts. This was a new magic Rhine comprehended after helping thousands of people over 3 years and absorbing their wish power. Because I fulfilled the wish for regaining health, I gained healing magic. My magic is much stronger than 3 years ago. Unfortunately, besides healing magic, I only know a few minor tricks, and I'm far from the witches in the kingdom's legends, by who knows how many levels. Feeling the power flowing within him, Rhine sighed silently. Alas, I still haven't found the so-called main character of destiny. I wonder what kind of person counts as a main character of destiny. For these 3 years, Rhine had secretly been anticipating that one day, the person who came to him for treatment would be the so-called main character of destiny, and after completing the treatment, he would suddenly find himself flooded with wish power. Regrettably, until today, Rhine had not encountered a main character of destiny who met the criteria. Thinking of this, the young man glanced at the fully armed soldier guard outside the carriage and found it somewhat amusing. Although he was a true magician, he only knew a few minor tricks and healing magic, and his physical body was still at a child's level. Any one of the soldiers in this squad could suddenly attack and cut him down with a sword. My magician is really a bit weak. In a fight, I'm not even as good as an average adult. I don't even have a combat power of 5. If I could find the so-called main character of destiny, how could I have fallen to this state? The young man spread his hands, looking utterly helpless and resigned. The carriage stopped in front of the palace. Rhine collected his scattered thoughts, walked into the magnificent palace, and bowed to the king and queen on the throne. The king spoke. Lin Zong's sage, your good name spreads between bonfires and wells. I hear that your medical skills are comparable to the most skilled doctors, and you have cured thousands of patients. Before Rhine could inquire about the reason for his summons, a shadow crossed the king's face, revealing weariness and helplessness. The queen and I have been married for many years and have always wished for a child, but it has not been granted. I am growing older, and the vast kingdom needs an heir. Lin Zong's sage, do you have a way to fulfill our wish? The little magician immediately understood the king's purpose in summoning him. He was here to treat infertility. Just as Rhine was about to ponder, he suddenly trembled, as if feeling an incredibly vast power. That surging power came from above the throne. It was the power of wishes. A power of wishes more immense than anything Rhine had seen in the past 3 years from any patient. Such immense wish power. Rhine understood the answer in an instant. Children of destiny. Are the king and queen the main characters of destiny? He had no doubt that if he could perfectly fulfill the king and queen's wish, the wish power he could absorb would surely far exceed the slow accumulation of the past 3 years. Rhine was utterly shocked. He never expected that the main characters of destiny he had been so eagerly awaiting would appear today. The king and queen's wish to bear a child, no matter how difficult, must be fulfilled by any means necessary. The little magician lowered his head, deep in thought. He couldn't do other magic, but concocting potions and healing magic were his strengths. Normally, he could cure the king and queen's ailments with just a wave of his hand. However, Rhine's concern was this. In a magical world with extraordinary powers, was the birth of a new life purely a medical issue? Seeing the profound expression on the handsome young man below the steps, the king comforted him. Lin Zong's sage, even if you cannot do it, there is no need to be afraid or blame yourself. There are 13 witches of great power in my kingdom. I have summoned 12 of them to the palace in turn and presented them with the same problem. But all 12 of them were helpless. Even if you were unable to help, I will not blame you. At this point, the king's face darkened a bit more. Indeed, even the 12 all-powerful witches couldn't do it. How likely was it that a new magician, so young in appearance and only recently gaining fame among commoners, could create a miracle? It was nothing more than a desperate attempt, just trying their luck. 13 witches. Only 12 were summoned. The king's words at that moment made Rhine tremble. He had heard before that there were several powerful witches in the kingdom, but he didn't know the exact number. Suddenly, Rhine remembered something. A startling conjecture emerged in his mind. His back tingled slightly. This was a fantasy magic world. Was it possible? He quickly pressed on. Your Majesty, since there are 13 witches in the kingdom, why were only 12 summoned? The king, unaware of Rhine's thoughts, answered naturally. Among the 13 witches, the most powerful Maleficent is a black witch. She is most skilled in terrifying curses and black magic. The nobles and commoners alike fear her. Rhine's eyes narrowed. Just as he thought. A kingdom with 12 good witches and 1 black witch. A king and queen who yearn for a child. He hadn't transmigrated to an ordinary fantasy world. This was the kingdom of Sleeping Beauty. In many versions of Sleeping Beauty, the story begins directly after the princess's birth, when the 12 witches are invited to bestow blessings upon her. But in other versions, the story starts even earlier. The beginning of the story is precisely the scene Rhine now witnessed. The king and queen had longed for a child for many years but were unable to conceive. If he was in the story of Sleeping Beauty, then the king and queen, as the protagonist's parents, would be important characters in the story, belonging to the protagonists of fate, which made perfect sense. Rhine knew clearly that even though the king and queen were now at their wits' end and heartbroken. Since this was the kingdom of Sleeping Beauty, the predicament faced by the king and queen was definitely not an insoluble problem. After all, they were destined to give birth to a little princess in the future. And that was the protagonist of the story, Sleeping Beauty. At this moment, the young man's heart was filled with both surprise and excitement. I've actually arrived in such an early era. An era before the story even began. He suppressed the astonishment in his heart and bowed slightly. Your Majesties, the King and Queen, there is no need to worry, I have a way to fulfill your wishes. Hearing Rhine's promise, the king trembled and immediately sat up straight. He was unsure whether the little magician in front of him was just making empty boasts or truly had a plan. The queen, who had been silent all this time, was equally shocked and looked at Rhine with doubt. Over the years, due to her long-term inability to bear children, her relationship with the king had grown increasingly distant, and in recent years, she had been repeatedly neglected. The queen had always suspected that the lack of children was not her fault, but she could not possibly voice this. After seeing that even the 12 witches with powerful magic were helpless, the queen had long lost hope of having her own child. Therefore, when summoning Rhine, the queen had no expectation of any turn for the better. However, the determined attitude displayed by this overly young magician made the queen regain some confidence. Perhaps this child could truly create a miracle. Your Majesties, allow me to cast a healing spell for both of you. Rhine gently raised his hand, chanted a spell, and a soft, pure white light radiated from his hand, bathing both the king and queen in its warm glow. Healing arts. Magic obtained after fulfilling the wish of thousands to be restored to health. Feeling the warm radiance bathing their entire bodies, the king and queen immediately felt completely comfortable, as if they had suddenly become several years younger, and all their old injuries and hidden ailments were cleansed away. The rumors were indeed true. Although this little magician looked very young, his abilities were extraordinary. The king and queen secretly marveled in their hearts. After the light faded, the king eagerly asked, Sir Rhine, is it done? Not yet, Your Majesty. To complete the treatment, it also needs to be combined with medicine. Rhine requested paper and pen and wrote down a prescription. Your Majesty, take the medicine according to the prescription I have written. Before long, you and the queen will surely bear offspring. After writing, Rhine showed a worried expression again. It's just that one of the ingredients is too rare, I don't know if it can be found in Your Majesty's kingdom. The king beckoned for a servant to bring the prescription to him and smiled as he examined it. He wasn't worried at all about any hard-to-obtain medicine. He was a monarch who ruled a kingdom, even if a herb was rare, so what? Was there any herb he couldn't get? They are all common medicines. The king scanned through each medicinal name. Just as the king thought Rhine was exaggerating the rarity of the medicine, his gaze fell on the last item. The monarch's eyes instantly froze. What's going on with this last medicine? Medicine name. A blessing spoken by an aquatic animal in human language. Method of use. Have an aquatic fish or frog bless the queen in human language. Bless the queen to have her own child. The king's expression immediately became awkward. Even though this was a fantasy continent, animals that could speak human language usually only appeared in legends. At least the king himself had never seen one. The king suppressed his anger and put down the prescription. Sir Rhine, please tell me, where can I find a fish that can speak human language? Rhine replied calmly, neither humble nor arrogant. Let us follow the arrangement of fate. Fate will guide all of us. As a visitor from outside this world, Ryan knew that compared to other magicians in this world, he possessed an unknown advantage. He knew how fate in the future would unfold. In this fairy tale world, he was the most brilliant prophet and seer. According to what Ryan knew, at the beginning of the Sleeping Beauty story, the queen, who had been childless for many years, gave birth to offspring precisely after receiving a blessing from a fish, in some versions, a frog. Therefore, as long as the plot developed normally, the king and queen would surely receive the fish's blessing and eventually bear offspring. He merely advanced this process, and in doing so, he could fulfill the wishes of the king and queen. The king, of course, could not know what the little magician at the foot of the throne was thinking, only assuming that this magician was uttering some meaningless charlatan remarks. The monarch's expression suddenly darkened. His cloudy eyes once again became dim. Sure enough, was there still no hope? The king sighed deeply. As a monarch who had ruled the kingdom for decades, the king understood. When magicians and learned sages believe a goal is too difficult to achieve, they will deliberately propose difficult conditions or unobtainable materials to give both parties a way out. This little magician in front of him clearly believed that his request was simply too difficult. Even the 12 witches with powerful magic could not achieve it. So, the little magician had no confidence in the medicine's effectiveness and deliberately wrote an impossible to collect ingredient at the end of the prescription. Even if it ultimately had no effect, it wouldn't be too embarrassing. Well, that's fine too. Asking a novice magician to solve a problem that even the 12 witches, with all their vast powers, couldn't handle, was indeed a bit much to ask. The aged monarch waved his hand somewhat helplessly, dismissing Ryan. All right, Lin Zong's sage, thank you for the prescription. I will reward you with gold and silver. Regardless, Ryan at least did his best, provided a prescription, and used magic to make him healthier than before, so he certainly deserved a reward. Ryan thanked the king and turned to leave. Wait a moment, Sir Magician. Just as Ryan was about to step out of the palace gates, the queen suddenly called out to him. May I ask, will our child be a boy or a girl, and what will she look like? The king looked at his wife's excited expression, feeling slightly amused, but it was not good to point it out directly. Under the king's astonished gaze, the little magician, clad in a hooded cloak and robe, turned, bowed slightly, spread his arms, and spoke with a confident tone as if stating a fact. Your child will be a beautiful and clever little princess. She carries a legendary destiny and will surely step onto the stage of fate, becoming the protagonist of a legendary chapter. 3 months passed since Ryan left the palace. During these 3 months, the king had completely given up the idea of having a child and accepted reality. He knew that even if he, being old, took more consorts, it would be difficult to bear offspring. The vast kingdom would inevitably fall into his brother's hands. He also took the medicine from the prescription on time. But he only held a glimmer of hope, waiting for a miracle, without truly believing the medicine could bring any change. To the monarch's surprise, Ryan's medicine was truly effective. The king could feel that ever since he started taking the medicine from the prescription, his body had indeed improved day by day, becoming more energetic and spirited. But even so, the queen showed no signs of pregnancy. Unlike the king, who had long given up hope, the queen still remembered Ryan's words from back then. The little magician's parting words echoed repeatedly in the queen's waking hours and dreams. He spoke with such certainty. He even explicitly said I would have a beautiful and lovely little princess. Is he a prophet or a seer? He must be. I've heard that many magicians can foresee the future. As long as I receive the fish's blessing, I can have my own child. Should I actively go to the river to seek the opportunity for a blessing? From then on, every evening, the queen would go for a walk by the river. Whenever she reached the riverbank, she would bend down and observe the fish in the water. Or she would cock her ear, trying to hear if the fish were whispering in human language. Or she would proactively ask the fish if she could have a child of her own. It was like this every night. Every day, only the gurgling sound of the water responded to the queen's call. The fish remained silent. The king, who had long since given up hope, always followed alongside, not understanding what his wife was doing. Or perhaps he vaguely guessed, but he didn't point it out or stop her. It was another twilight of wine and women. The sun was setting in the west. The queen, as usual, squatted by the river, watching the bloody sunset dye the river crimson, and watching the fish swim through the shimmering water. The queen, as on previous days, softly asked the fish in the water, "Can I have a child of my own?" The fruitless attempts day after day had made the queen treat the process of squatting down to ask the fish in the water as part of her daily routine. She didn't even realize that she had become numb to the completely identical fruitless routine, not expecting any results today. As usual, only the clear, bell-like sound of flowing water responded to the queen's inquiry. Still the same as before. The queen stood up, about to leave. Suddenly, a golden fish swam to the water in front of the queen and stopped. The queen's eyes narrowed. Reflected in the queen's increasingly widening pupils was an astonishing scene. The fish opened its mouth and spoke in human language. "Dear queen, your wish will soon come true. You and the king are about to have a lovely daughter." After speaking, the fish wagged its tail and disappeared into the school of fish, as the queen watched dumbfounded. The queen's expression froze on her face. She stood rooted to the spot, like a stone statue. It was several seconds before she suddenly realized what had just happened. The recent experience was like a dream. The fish spoke. The fish spoke in human language and gave me a blessing. The queen was both surprised and delighted. She danced with excitement and ran to tell the king beside her what she had witnessed. Seeing his wife excitedly running towards him, the king looked puzzled, thinking that the queen, who had been longing for a child day and night, was hallucinating. But then, several loyal soldiers around them all stated, "Your Majesty, we just saw with our own eyes a fish open its mouth and speak, and it blessed Her Majesty the Queen." Soon after, the queen indeed became pregnant. What that little magician said was all true. He didn't lie to me. Seeing his aging wife pregnant for the first time, the king was both surprised and delighted. Summon little magician Rhine, bring him into the palace. In fact, without waiting for the king's attendants to send another message, Rhine, far away in the kingdom's borderlands, already knew that the wish had been fulfilled. In the cabin in the woods, Rhine's body trembled, and then he felt a surge of immense wish power flowing towards him. The magic deep within his soul boiled like hot water, rising at an astonishing speed, before finally calming down after a good while. Feeling the much more immense magic in his body than before, Rhine was both surprised and delighted. Indeed, Sleeping Beauty's parents, as important characters in the fairy tale, belong to the protagonists of fate. Fulfilling their wish to have a child naturally brought great benefits. Although this was an inevitable fate that would have happened anyway, Rhine had cured their old illness, prescribed effective medicine, and made correct predictions, accelerating the process of fate. And the king and queen, unaware of fate's arrangements, genuinely believed this was Rhine's contribution. Therefore, he could still obtain the corresponding wish power. It seems I also learned a new magic. The young boy walked out of the house, waved his small hand, and an emerald green glow blossomed. The fallen leaves in the forest seemed to come alive, flying up on their own without wind, forming into blurry human figures. The little figures made of leaves respectfully bowed to the little magician. This was the new magic Rhine had acquired after fulfilling the king and queen's wish to have a child, allowing him to imbue inanimate objects with life. The simplest use was to temporarily animate surrounding objects, turning them into obedient servants and soldiers. There were also more complex functions yet to be developed. It's quite useful, and I have some self-preservation ability now. Let's call it imbue life. Rhine gently waved his hand, causing the little figures made of leaves to disperse, turning into scattered leaves on the ground. He was confident that his current magic level, although probably still not comparable to the 12 powerful witches in the kingdom, should not be too far off. The main difference was in experience as a spellcaster and the types of magic learned. He could make up for this by fulfilling one or two more similar wishes. Rhine couldn't help but fantasize. Just helping Sleeping Beauty's parents fulfill their wish brought such great benefits. This is just now, Sleeping Beauty has not yet been born. Otherwise, if I had helped Sleeping Beauty herself, as the true protagonist of the story, would I have gained even more? Collecting his thoughts, more doubts and curiosities surged in the young boy's heart. Did I transmigrate into the story of Sleeping Beauty? But the story of Sleeping Beauty only mentions one kingdom, and doesn't describe what the world outside the kingdom is like. But here, I often hear legends of other kingdoms, and stories of little magicians and warriors from other lands. What is this broader fantasy continent like, beyond Sleeping Beauty's kingdom? Rhine was summoned by the king again. The handsome boy, dressed as a little magician, with a robe and hood, walked towards the magnificent palace, escorted by soldiers. The robe was a bit too long for Rhine's small frame, trailing on the ground. The sun was bright today, with pure white clouds against a blue sky. In the palace, the king smiled broadly. Praise be to you, Lin Zong sage. Your prophecy has come true. The fish offered a blessing to my wife, and we will soon have our own child. Rhine bowed to the king. No need to thank me, your majesty. Everything is fate's arrangement. I merely did some insignificant work in it. He then asked, is there anything else you require of me, your majesty, for summoning me this time? The king's eyes lit up, and he spoke the lines he had long wanted to say. Lin Zong sage, I heard you live in a wooden cabin in the forest. A dilapidated house cannot shelter you from wind and rain. My palace has astonishingly strong warriors, but it lacks an outstanding sage and a superb little magician like you. Rhine, I sincerely invite you to live in the palace and become a court advisor for the next 10 years. You will be revered as the sage of Rose Kingdom. You will have countless gold and silver, the people of the kingdom will revere you, and fully armed soldiers will guard your safety day and night. You will possess power second only to mine, and whatever your request, as long as it is within reasonable limits, the entire kingdom will do its best to fulfill it. Oh, and my court also has an ancient magic book, passed down through generations, recording abundant magical knowledge and various powerful spells. If you are willing to become the court's sage, that magic book will also belong to you. Rhine, what do you say? Will you consider my proposal? As if afraid Rhine would refuse, the king tried every possible way to offer the most generous terms. As far as he knew, most little magicians were eccentric, preferring to live in secluded forest cabins or gloomy ancient castles, alone, concocting potions or researching ancient magic. They might be temporarily summoned by the king, but they would not be willing to serve the monarchy long-term. The 13 witches in the kingdom were all like this. They might occasionally obey the king's orders, but they would never consider becoming court advisors. Now, a new little magician had suddenly appeared in the kingdom, and his talent seemed no less, perhaps even surpassing, the existing witches in the kingdom. The king naturally tried every means to win him over. Rhine was briefly silent, seemingly considering the king's proposal. The king swallowed hard. Even though he had offered generous terms, he was already mentally prepared for Rhine to refuse. This continent was vast. There were countless kingdoms, large and small. The clouds were the land of giants, mermaids swam in the sea, mysterious forest doors led to unknown secret realms, and in the Far East, there was a prosperous and powerful Eastern Empire. There were many kings like him in the world. Most kings were not worthy of a little magician's long-term loyalty. The next moment, below the steps of the throne, the handsome, silver-haired boy, as if stepped out of a painting, gently bowed. I accept your request, your majesty, it is my honor. Rhine placed one hand on his chest. From now on, I am the court's sage. The king breathed a sigh of relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. He agreed. Rhine couldn't even think of a reason to refuse. 10 years might seem long to others, but for him, who would no longer age, it was merely a fleeting moment, a small segment of the thousands of years to come. Perhaps most other little magicians were eccentric and reclusive, but for him, enjoying the comfortable life of the court, why not? Moreover, compared to the rewards of fame and material wealth, he was more interested in that ancient magic book. The types of magic he currently mastered were too limited. Perhaps that magic book could teach him more practical spells and give him a greater understanding of the supernatural forces in this world. Additionally, upon discovering that he had not transmigrated into an ordinary fantasy medieval setting, but into the kingdom of Sleeping Beauty, Rhine was filled with curiosity about this world. What was it like outside the kingdom? What kind of continent had he truly arrived on? Ordinary people in this era found it difficult to learn about things beyond their immediate surroundings. Legends heard from commoners were certainly more false than true. But kings and nobles were different. They had to deal with foreign countries. Perhaps, through the court, I will have the opportunity to understand the full scope of this broader fantasy continent beyond the kingdom. The king was still immersed in the joy and shock of little magician Rhine agreeing to his request, but the queen beside him had already impatiently asked. Rhine, you said before that the child I will bear is a clever and lovely little princess, is that right? Exactly so. Rhine replied. The unborn princess was the future Sleeping Beauty. The queen smiled joyfully. Since that is the case, sage of Rose Kingdom, court little magician, I would like to ask you to name our lovely daughter. Sage Rhine was slightly stunned. Am I really the one to name Sleeping Beauty? Participating personally in a well-known, household fairy tale, and naming the as yet unborn heroine of the story, such a legendary experience gave Sage Rhine a strong sense of unreality. The queen nodded gently. The king also smiled knowingly, reaching out to signal the slightly surprised Sage Rhine to boldly name her. Ancient wise men have said that a name is the starting point of a newborn's destiny. A good name determines the direction of one's life. It is a tradition of the kingdom for a learned sage to name a newborn. In my kingdom, no one is more suitable than you, Sir Rhine, to name our daughter. The little magician lowered his head in thought, his eyes flickering with ideas. There have been countless versions of Sleeping Beauty throughout history. The heroine's name was not fixed in different versions. In some versions, the heroine was even simply called Princess. After a brief contemplation, Sage Rhine had an answer in his heart. Let's call the little princess Aurora. Sage Rhine spread his arms, his tone suddenly rising. Its meaning is dawn, the first light of morning. Even in the deepest, darkest night, dawn will surely come. May hope and light illuminate the little princess's future path. This name was not chosen randomly by Sage Rhine. The name Aurora originally belonged to Sleeping Beauty's daughter in a certain version. Tchaikovsky, in his ballet, changed it to the name of the princess herself, who is Sleeping Beauty. Disney's Sleeping Beauty also continued to use this name. Since then, whether translated as Aerith, Aurora, or otherwise, the beautiful name Aurora has become the most recognized name for Sleeping Beauty worldwide. Sage Rhine also simply followed the will of fate and chose this beautiful name. Aurora, what a truly beautiful name, the queen applauded softly, full of admiration. The king was also quite satisfied. Sir Rhine, after Princess Aurora is born, I plan to hold a grand banquet. At that time, I will invite the 12 witches of the kingdom to baptize and bless the newborn little princess. And I also ask you, the learned magician, Sir Rhine, to likewise bestow blessings upon the princess. Sage Rhine smiled, placing a hand over his chest. It is my honor. After speaking, the little magician's expression grew a few shades more serious. He knew that the future would be the familiar story of Sleeping Beauty. At the celebration of Princess Aurora's birth, the 13th witch of the kingdom who was not invited, that infamous Black Witch, felt resentment and crashed the event. The Black Witch cursed the newborn princess, causing her to die at 15 by pricking her finger on a spindle. In some versions of the story, the king did not invite the 13th witch because there were exactly 12 plates for distinguished guests, no more, no less. Simply put, it was a bloodbath caused by a golden plate. But looking at it now, this wasn't the entire reason. More so, the king himself disliked the Black Witch. Thinking of this impending curse, Sage Rhine's eyes narrowed slightly. Is this a destiny that can be changed? Sage Rhine looked up, his face solemn beneath his hood, and kindly advised in his capacity as the kingdom's sage. Your Majesty, since there are 13 powerful witches in the kingdom, if only 12 of them are invited, will the one who is overlooked not feel resentful? Especially considering Maleficent's personality. She is not a forgiving person. Intentionally ignoring her, I wonder if it will invite disaster. Maleficent was the name of the Black Witch that Sage Rhine had recently learned. Hearing Sage Rhine's words, the king's eyes suddenly froze. The monarch of this kingdom felt a prickling sensation down his spine, and a chill surged through his bones. That's right. I actually overlooked such a big problem just now. Only after Sage Rhine's reminder did he realize the immense hidden danger in his rash decision. That infamous Black Witch Maleficent was the strongest, yet also the most petty, of the 13. The princess's baptism ceremony, being such a grand event, would surely be known throughout the kingdom. At that time, if Maleficent was not invited, it would certainly incur her displeasure. Just thinking of the disaster that was almost brought upon them, the king broke out in a cold sweat. He was merely a mortal monarch and dared not provoke the powerful Black Witch. Legendary magicians possess a lifespan so long it is almost eternal, enough to witness the rise and fall of kingdoms. The power of worldly kings is not worth mentioning to them. If they wished, they could completely curse or even destroy an entire kingdom according to their will. Even the items they crafted, if picked up by someone with ill intentions, could bring disaster to a kingdom. Throughout continental history, stories often circulated. A poor boy accidentally found a magical item left by an ancient magician, easily killed the nobles and king who oppressed him, and became the new king of the country. Although the king could not be certain if Black Witch Maleficent was as formidable as in the legendary stories. But he dared not gamble. Fortunately, Sage Rhine reminded him in time. The king recovered from his lingering fear. Sir Rhine, thank you for your reminder. If Maleficent were not invited, she would certainly bear a grudge. Since that is the case, I intend to treat everyone equally and invite all the witches in the kingdom. Normally, the king would certainly not dare to invite the Black Witch to his palace. But on the day of the little princess's baptism ceremony, with the other 12 witches and Sir Rhine present, Maleficent surely wouldn't cause trouble, and no accidents should occur. At least, the king believed so. Seeing that the king had listened to his advice, Sage Rhine nodded gently and said no more. He had already plucked the strings of fate. The original reason that led to the Black Witch cursing Sleeping Beauty no longer existed. Would the story's direction change? In the blink of an eye, several days had passed since Sage Rhine offered his advice. The king kept Sage Rhine's counsel in mind, planning to invite all 13 witches to the palace after the little princess's birth, so that they, along with Sage Rhine, who was already the court magician, could together bestow blessings upon Princess Aurora. These past few days, he had been busy preparing for this grand ceremony. However, the king soon discovered a problem. The palace's tableware reserved for the highest-ranking guests was a type of golden plate with exquisite and luxurious patterns. No more, no less, there were exactly 12 of them. If all 13 witches were to be invited, those 12 golden plates would not be enough. They couldn't possibly have the other 12 witches use golden plates and make Black Witch Maleficent use a silver plate. The Black Witch would surely fly into a rage and directly curse the entire kingdom. It would be better not to invite her from the start. As for Sage Rhine, as a member of the court, although his tableware was exquisite and beautiful, its style was different from that of the guests, so there was no need for special preparation. Thus, the king summoned the old craftsman who had served the kingdom his entire life and issued an order. You and your artisans, using this gold, are to craft another golden plate, replicating the style of the existing ones prepared for honored guests. The new plate must be exactly identical to the existing ones. The old craftsman received the order and returned home, where he met his younger brother, Oz, who happened to be home that day. Unlike his elder brother, the old craftsman's younger brother, Oz, was a gifted magician. Oz detested the fate of his family serving as kingdom craftsman for generations, and from a young age, he yearned for the powerful magicians in legendary stories. He always fantasized that one day, like the witches in the kingdom, he too would possess the magical power to summon wind and rain. However, as little Oz slowly grew up, he gradually realized that, like most people, he was merely one of the common populace, destined to be without magical powers his entire life. But Oz was still unwilling to abandon his childhood dream. He settled for learning magic, how to use gestures, props, and performance to deceive the audience's eyes, achieving skills that were almost like a magician's. Thus, Oz became an excellent magician. Unlike his rigid brother, Oz was a genius at magic, with an endless supply of fresh ideas and creativity. He used chemical reactions, stage lighting, and special performance techniques to invent hundreds of novel magic tricks, gradually becoming the best magician of his era. Thus, Oz's reputation grew wider and wider, performing on tour in several kingdoms. Below the stage, men and women of different social strata praised him, screaming for his performances. Amidst the flowers and applause, Oz felt as if he had become a true magician with extraordinary power. Today, the middle-aged Oz, upon learning of his brother's new task, teased him. The king truly trusts you all, to just hand over the gold to you and your craftsmen like that. If I were you, I might even consider pocketing some of the gold myself. Ha ha ha, what can I say, I'm a guy who makes a living by deceiving people. Look at me, on stage, I deceive everyone. And the people I deceive willingly pay me. Oz said this casually, not taking it to heart, and then went to sleep. But what he didn't know was that his careless words echoed in the old craftsman's heart for a long time. That's right, why did I never think of pocketing a little? The court jesters and clowns, as long as they knew how to flatter and tell a joke, could receive generous rewards. Yet I have diligently served the king my entire life, and my wealth and status are not as good as theirs. I deserve better. Crafting a golden plate, this task was incredibly easy for the skilled old craftsman. Over the years, the old craftsman's craftsmanship had become extremely refined. He was familiar with every step of the crafting process, knew every inspection procedure for the finished product, and understood which details had loopholes and which procedural steps were most likely to lead to oversight. Therefore, the old craftsman was very certain that merely pocketing a tiny bit of gold and subtly mixing in a little cheap metal into the finished product had no chance of being discovered. Just as the king was preparing for the little princess's baptism ceremony, Sage Rhine also accepted his new identity. The king's advisor, the court magician, the kingdom's sage. Now, his power was second only to the king's. Of course, Sage Rhine didn't think this was anything remarkable. Such a small kingdom, whether in terms of population or area, was not worth praising. Never mind becoming the kingdom's sage, what if he even became the king? Since he had come to a fantasy world with extraordinary powers, compared to worldly power, he was only interested in two things: magical power and the world itself. Immediately upon assuming his role as court magician, Sage Rhine issued two commands. The first command was to have a servant go to the depths of the library to retrieve the magic book that had been passed down in the kingdom for hundreds of years. That was the key to him becoming a truly powerful magician. The second command was to obtain the most detailed world map of the kingdom. And from the court's collection of books, he acquired a large stack of documents and books describing foreign countries and the general state of the world. What kind of world have I transmigrated into? What lies beyond Sleeping Beauty's kingdom? Sage Rhine craved answers. It could have been translated as Aurora, but that would make some people hallucinate it as the sister of the female protagonist from Circle of Inevitability, so the Chinese name, Aurora, was used. Definitely an important character. In a novel where most character names are king, queen, witch, soldier, a character having a name carries weight. The cloaked youth perused the numerous documents on the table. His fingertips moved across the world map, connecting the contents of the documents with the countries on the map. In this era of backward productivity, the maps were terribly crude, the images a chaotic mess, the scale completely off, and there were large areas that were purely imaginary. But with enough documents and records, it wasn't entirely unreadable. When he first began to read the documents in his hand, Rhine's expression was calm, and a smile still lingered on his lips. However, as he read on, the little magician's smile gradually froze, and his expression grew increasingly solemn. Later, the hand Rhine used to hold the book trembled uncontrollably, and cold sweat streamed down his forehead. Why is it like this? Rhine had originally thought he had transmigrated into the story of Sleeping Beauty. Beyond the kingdom, it wouldn't be too special, just a normal Western fantasy world. But after understanding the general situation of the continent, he realized that it was not like that at all. The known extent of this fantasy world was a continent. In the west, various nations stood, with countless small kingdoms dotted across the land. The kingdom where Rhine and Sleeping Beauty resided was just one of hundreds of ordinary kingdoms. The eastern regions had cultures similar to Earth's Arab cultural sphere. As for the even more distant Far East, the court documents were very vague. They only vaguely mentioned that in the distant East, there was a prosperous empire with a mysterious and magnificent culture. Why does that sound so familiar? Rhine's mouth twitched slightly. What truly astonished Rhine were the world details, a mixture of many folk legends and true records. According to research, on certain thick white clouds, there are castles of giants. In the vast ocean, there is the Mermaid Country. A world-traveling adventurer claimed to have fallen into a tree hole and accidentally entered a bizarre country. A traveler from the Middle East desert recounted the extraordinary things of their country. He mentioned flying carpets, giant rock birds, and huge divine beings trapped in vessels, promising to fulfill mortals' wishes. What kind of stitched-together world have I transmigrated into? Ryan could no longer hold back his furious make complaints. One familiar story title after another surged from his mind. I wonder what era it is now. Have those familiar stories from my previous life already become history? Or, like the story of Sleeping Beauty, have they not yet begun? The earlier the era, the more room I have to maneuver. After dealing with Princess Aurora's problem and becoming a more powerful magician, I must go outside the kingdom to see. Ryan made up his mind. Immediately after, he picked up the magic book from the table. Book of Transformation and Summoning. Ryan eagerly opened the yellowed pages. What greeted his eyes were obscure and strange texts and symbols. According to the king, this book had been passed down for several hundred years. Legend has it that only those who understood magic could comprehend the words within the book. Because no true magician could be found to become the book's owner, such a magic book, which contained priceless treasures, could only remain neglected for a long time, sealed deep within the library. After discovering that the witches in the kingdom seemed interested in this book, the king proposed to the 12 witches to exchange the magic book for any one of them to serve as a court advisor for a few years, but his offer was rejected. Clearly, this book held some appeal for the powerful witches. But it was not enough to make them lower their noble heads and serve the monarchy. It was this cruel experience of being mercilessly rejected that made the king even more cautious when inviting Ryan to be a court advisor, offering the most generous terms from the very beginning. The moment he opened the book, Ryan immediately confirmed that the legend was true. As a true magician, he automatically understood every bizarre and twisted word in the book. After quickly flipping through it once, Ryan excitedly discovered that the content recorded in this book was exactly what he wanted. Ryan's magic was automatically acquired after his transmigration, and without a mentor, his knowledge of mysticism and the supernatural was quite lacking. This book recorded a large amount of basic knowledge about magic, which just compensated for his shortcomings. Not only that, but the book also contained various practical spells. Those 12 witches must be more powerful than I am now, yet they were unwilling to bow down and become advisors to the kingdom, which resulted in them not being able to take this book. Reading the magic book in his hands with avid hunger, the silver-haired boy's smile grew even brighter. Flipping through the yellowed pages, Lord Ryan, who had mastered magic for 3 years, gained a clear understanding of the world's magical structure for the first time. The magicians in this world are closer to the classical magician image found in myths, fairy tales, and folk legends, quite different from modern games and anime. Nowadays, when most people mention magic, the first thing that comes to mind is a turret-like figure using fireballs and lightning. However, the image of these turret-like magicians, who throw fireballs and lightning and protect themselves with shields, only became widely accepted much later. At least, it had to wait until the later rise of the tabletop game, Dungeons & Dragons, coupled with the popularization and widespread appeal of Japan's Dragon Quest series. In contrast, most of the magic used by more classical magicians lacked direct offensive capabilities. The functions of magic often involved transformation, summoning, charm, curses, potion brewing, prophecy, divination, and so on. And the Book of Transformation and Summoning, as its name suggests, primarily covers the two major categories of transformation and summoning, but it also includes some miscellaneous magic and a wealth of comprehensive magical knowledge. After a quick browse, Lord Ryan began to meticulously study and memorize the key principles, attempting to practice the spells within. In the blink of an eye, half a month passed. It was another bright and clear afternoon. The soaring cry of an eagle pierced the clouds, startling the sky. A magnificent eagle with beautiful feathers flew out of the palace window and circled in the azure sky. The eagle swooped down, flying over the heads of guards, attendants, and royal officials, eliciting gasps of admiration. The court jester, who was performing, looked up and missed the ball he had tossed into the air. The royal officials followed the eagle's flight path in the sky with their gazes, their astonishment and excitement evident on their faces. The eagle skillfully made a few turns in the air and landed by the fountain in the garden. The eagle shook its body, and with a ripple, transformed into a human form. It was, surprisingly, a handsome boy. He wore a hooded cloak, his figure slender and petite, and his robe almost trailed to the ground. Amidst the astonished gasps and praises behind him, Lord Ryan walked straight through the shady path without looking back, returning to his bedroom. As that king's advisor, the kingdom's sage, court magician Lord Rhine. What miraculous power! To witness a genuine magician cast magic at such a close distance, it was unimaginable before. Wow! Even after seeing it several times, I still couldn't remember the process of Lord Rhine's transformation. In the garden, people discussed the miraculous scene they had just witnessed. Similar scenes had occurred many times in the palace's backyard recently. When Lord Rhine first became the kingdom's sage, many royal officials didn't believe that such a powerful magician would be willing to serve as a long-term court advisor. And this court advisor was even granted power second only to the king. Because of this, he attracted no small amount of doubt and gossip. Some ill-intentioned individuals even secretly spread rumors that the king had encountered a charlatan, and that the hired magician had no magic at all, being merely a circus clown. Even the king had to face pressure from all sides and could only privately find Lord Rhine, asking him to prove himself before the officials. That afternoon, in the palace's backyard, Lord Rhine performed his first magic show. When the eagle transformed into human form before everyone's eyes, all doubts turned into jokes. Since then, Lord Rhine's performances during his magic practice became the most anticipated event of the afternoon for the royal officials. What Lord Rhine didn't know was that today was different from other days. His performance had also been witnessed by a special audience. His face was slightly round, his build a bit plump, and he was honest and amiable, none other than Oz, the kingdom's most famous magician. Oz had originally been invited to the palace today to perform for the officials. But clearly, Lord Rhine's magic attracted far more attention than his own tricks. Oz watched the hooded boy disappear at the end of the green path. In his heart, an unstoppable shock reverberated. Half a minute later, Oz only remembered to blink because his eyes were too dry. This is a magician. This is magic, real magic, not the sleight of hand tricks I perform on stage. A power I will never be able to touch in my lifetime. A magician like Lord Rhine, possessing extraordinary power, probably wouldn't even spare a glance at my magic tricks. Speaking of which, Lord Rhine looks so young. Such a young child, and he's already become a court advisor. No, I heard that magicians have potions that keep them eternally youthful. His age might be older than my grandmother's grandmother. Oz closed his eyes, the miracle he had just witnessed lingering in his mind. The scene of the magnificent eagle transforming into human form in an instant was deeply etched in his heart for a long time. Even many years later, in Emerald City of Oz, Oz, who was mistaken for the king of magicians due to others' misunderstanding, would still recall the scene he witnessed today, again and again, in his deep sleep. Then he would suddenly awaken from his long dream, drenched in sweat. Lord Rhine returned to his bedroom and assessed the results of his shapeshifting training. I can now completely control the transformed body. In fact, with the help of magic, I can fly even better than a real eagle. The young man picked up the Book of Transformation and Summoning from the table again and began to take notes in it. According to this book, for novice magicians, it takes at least 1 or 2 years to get started and barely be able to transform into an animal. And to learn the entire contents of the book, it would take more than 30 years. But I got started after only a few days of learning. Now, after less than a month of practice, I'm already quite proficient. This made Lord Rhine both excited and surprised. Could it be that I am a 1 in a million magical prodigy? Lord Rhine estimated that at his current pace, by the time Princess Aurora was born, he might have already mastered the entire magic book. Even if something unexpected happened, he would be able to handle it. The king has already followed my advice and invited all 13 witches to attend Princess Aurora's baptism ceremony. I wonder how fate will unfold. Time flew like an arrow, days and months like a shuttle. Time passed. More than half a year later, Aurora was born. As Sage Rhine had prophesied, the child was a lovely little princess. The king held a grand banquet, inviting all 13 witches in the kingdom to attend the little princess's baptism ceremony. At that time, the 13 witches, together with Sage Rhine, would bestow blessings upon Aurora. Princess Lillian, this way please. Lillian, wearing a beautiful, pure white gown of golden silk, custom made for the ceremony and fitting her figure perfectly, entered the magnificent and spacious hall under the escort of her attendants. The young magician's steps were steady, her luxurious pure white golden silk gown fluttering in the wind, exuding an air of elegance and nobility. Lillian gently gathered her long robe and gracefully sat in the splendid seat beside the king and queen. This was the position reserved for the kingdom's sage. Compared to when she first entered the palace a few months ago, Lillian was now much more composed and confident. The past half-year had not been boring for the young man. Every day, he was immersed in the wonders of magic. Supernatural power was indeed the most alluring. With her astonishing magical talent and half a year of diligent practice, Lillian was no longer the young magician who could only perform parlor tricks. Based on the intelligence she had gathered about witches over the past half-year, Lillian estimated that her current magical level might not be inferior even to Sylvian, the leader of the 12 good witches in the kingdom. Of course, she certainly couldn't compare to Maleficent, the Black Witch, who was rumored to be able to cover the entire kingdom with her magic. Lillian collected her thoughts and watched the noble guests entering along the red carpet, sensing the joyful atmosphere. Tonight was the night of Princess Aurora's christening ceremony. It was also a day of national celebration. The king and queen, who had been childless for many years, had finally given birth to an heir. There were few things more worthy of celebration than this. Throughout the entire kingdom, all criminals, unless they had committed grave offenses, were granted amnesty. Uncollected taxes were also deferred. Everything was done to ensure that nothing spoiled the joyful atmosphere of this day. From top to bottom across the nation, regardless of noble or commoner, all offered blessings for the birth of the little princess. In the streets and alleys far from the capital, peddlers chatted about tonight's celebration. In remote villages, farmers also discussed the princess's birth. And as for the capital, the center of the celebration, there was even more to say. Tonight, the royal city would not sleep, its lights shining brightly. Ribbons fluttered. Songs of joy echoed to the heavens. Many royal families and nobles from foreign lands had come. Their entourages were splendid, having traveled a long way, solely to present lavish gifts to the newborn Princess Aurora. What an astonishing display! Just the foreign nobles attending this ceremony include 16 delegations from different countries. Lillian sat in her designated seat as the court magician, carefully observing the delegations participating in the ceremony, and couldn't help but exclaim. In front, one after another, members of foreign royal families, whose names she couldn't keep track of, approached the king, presented their generous gifts, offered blessings, and spoke words of extreme praise for the princess's birth. The young magician's eyes narrowed slightly. The more fervent, solemn, and grand this ceremony became, the thicker the celebratory atmosphere. The more Lillian worried that an unexpected turn of events would occur. Next, the 13 witches of astonishing magical power will enter. The 13 witches walked into the hall along the crimson carpet. They wore brightly colored attire, each with a different dominant color. Together, they looked like a rainbow from afar. However, among these 13 people, there was one exception who seemed out of place with the others. The witch walking at the very end of the procession was tall, draped in a dark purple robe, possessing a dark beauty and a cold elegance. At times she was as cold as frost, and at other times she would suddenly burst into earth-shattering laughter. One moment she would wave to the people around her, and the next she would talk to herself, appearing mentally unstable. The other 12 witches deliberately kept their distance from this colleague. The Black Witch. Unlike the original plot, she had also received an invitation from the king. Upon seeing the Black Witch, the old king's body visibly trembled. Clearly, the king harbored considerable psychological trauma regarding this infamous dark magic grandmaster. It's a good thing I haven't done anything to offend her. Besides, today there are also 12 other witches present, and also Princess Lillian. The old king lightly patted his chest, reassuring himself inwardly, his gaze involuntarily glancing at the slender young man beside him. Oh, this is a beautiful day. So many noble guests have come. The Black Witch looked left and right, her tone erratic. The Prince of the Northern Kingdom has come, the Knights of the Western Kingdom have come, and a delegation of nobles has come from the Eastern Desert to present lavish gifts. Wow, so many royal princes and nobles have also come. I thought a monster like me wouldn't have the chance to be invited. Ha 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 ha. I'm so happy. The Black Witch burst into laughter, holding her stomach and laughing loudly as if she had heard a very funny joke. Her exaggerated movements made everyone around her slightly tense and uneasy. Ignoring the reactions of the crowd, the Black Witch sat down with the other witches at their assigned seats. In front of the 13 witches' seats, there was a splendid golden platter. Esteemed guests, let us begin our meal. Let us celebrate this wonderful night together. As the king spoke, the princes, nobles, foreign guests, and the 13 witches all began to enjoy the lavish feast. After speaking, the king glanced at Rhine beside him, wanting to see if the kingdom's sage had any opinions. However, the learned little magician remained silent, simply burying his head in the delicious food on his plate. As expected of Sir Rhine, he is quite composed. Perhaps I was too nervous, the king breathed a sigh of relief. Rhine skillfully cut another piece of roasted steak, putting the juicy, delicious beef into his mouth, savoring the resilience of the beef juices bursting in his oral cavity. It's so delicious. As expected of a celebration, it's much better than what I usually eat. Rhine stuffed mouthful after mouthful of food into his mouth. He gorged himself to the maximum extent possible, while still maintaining the composed, elegant, and learned image of the kingdom's sage. This was also the reason for Rhine's silence. The food was so delicious, how could he have time to talk? Chatting during a meal is truly a bad habit. Food is meant to be eaten. Woo, this roasted potato is also so delicious. Of course, while enjoying the food, Rhine did not forget his identity and was constantly aware of the Black Witch's position. The Black Witch seemed to have little appetite. She only took a few bites, then stared at the remaining food on her plate, silent. Her expression was as cold as ice, but she showed no malice. Dinner ended. Next, please welcome the 13 witches and court magician Sir Rhine, to bestow their blessings upon Princess Aurora's birth at the end of the celebration. One by one, the witches stepped onto the stage, examining the little princess in the luxurious baby cradle, and began their blessings. Princess Aurora, I bestow upon you the most peerless beauty in the world. Your countenance shall be unrivaled, your charm unparalleled. Everyone who sees you will be captivated and unable to extricate themselves. Your every frown and smile will move all living beings, and the people of the world will surely be captivated by you. The first witch offered her blessing. Just like the original, such a cliché blessing, Rhine secretly complained. Brilliant light burst forth from the cradle, illuminating the entire hall, as if dyeing the night into dawn. The radiance enveloping the little princess in the cradle gradually faded. The features of the infant in the swaddling clothes slowly changed, her skin became more delicate, and a beautiful embryo slowly came into being. Logically, a newborn baby is not likely to be very attractive. But the supernatural blessing overturned the laws of nature. Even while still in the cradle, the little princess seemed to exude an intoxicating, extraordinary aura. It is imaginable what a world-toppling beauty she would be when she became a graceful young woman. Seeing this, the king and queen smiled broadly, their mouths agape with surprise. Just the blessing of the first witch had brought about such a great change. When all the witches and Sir Rhine had finished bestowing their blessings, wouldn't their daughter gather all the virtues and beautiful hopes of the human world? Is this the blessing of a witch? It can actually achieve such a degree. The queen could not help but exclaim. Rhine's voice came from beside her. Your Majesties, the king and queen, you too must be wondering why the witch who bestowed the blessing, who herself is merely a woman of peaceful appearance and no peerless beauty, could bestow Princess Aurora with a world-beautifying countenance, right? The king and queen were both stunned simultaneously. What? We never even considered that question. If Rhine hadn't reminded them, they would never have thought about such a strange question as, why does a witch who can bestow peerless beauty not possess peerless beauty herself? They had quite naturally accepted the bizarre premise that, witches can bestow things they themselves do not possess. Seeing the profound confusion in the king and queen's eyes, Rhine smiled. Blessing. This is perhaps the most powerful and extraordinary ability of magicians, deities, and fairy spirits in various fairy tales, myths, and folk stories. Blessings can defy logic, violate natural laws, and achieve causality-level self-realization. However, the most absurd part is what a hero can achieve after receiving a blessing. The caster who bestows the blessing, in all likelihood, cannot achieve it themselves. The most typical example is Indian mythology. Acquiring blessings, beating up the heavenly emperor, and then having the blessing exploited and broken. Similarly, the Norse mythological dragon-slaying hero Siegfried, who became invulnerable after bathing in dragon blood, can also be seen as having received a certain blessing. But it is evident that the dragon that provided the dragon blood and was killed did not possess the ability of invulnerability. Otherwise, dear dragon, how were you killed? Over the past 6 months of studying magic books, Rhine had not only mastered more magic but also became an expert in mysticism and the supernatural, gaining a clear understanding of such peculiar issues. Facing the bewildered king and queen, Rhine slowly explained. Blessing may be the most extraordinary power in this world. Its strength not only originates from the bestower, but more from the world itself. The more a hero bears an important destiny, the more legendary a figure they are, the more powerful blessings they can receive. Therefore, the power of a blessing can even achieve things that the bestower themselves cannot do. What's more, the object of this blessing is Princess Aurora. After speaking, Rhine fell silent again, sighing meaningfully. The queen was silent for half a second. Suddenly, she seemed to understand Rhine's words. Does Sir Rhine mean that Princess Aurora will become a very legendary figure? Yes, when she first met Sir Rhine, he said that the future little princess would have a legendary destiny. Did Sir Rhine see such a distant future from the very beginning? She also wondered what blessing Sir Rhine would ultimately bestow upon the little princess. One by one, the witches walked onto the stage, offering blessings to the little princess in the cradle. I bestow upon you a heart of gold. You are kind, humble, honest, strong, and just. You pity the weak and discern right from wrong. I bestow upon you a melodious voice and singing. Your voice can enchant people's hearts and minds, bringing even the most stone-hearted to tears. I bestow upon you a healthy physique, a perfect body bestowed by the gods. You shall be healthy your entire life, never tiring, never falling ill. You shall have an eidetic memory, easily learning the knowledge of the world, surpassing even the most learned scholars. Each time a witch offered a blessing, the hall was illuminated by a dazzling glow. The witches, as if ticking off a list, poured all the beautiful qualities of humanity onto the little princess. To avoid repeating the blessings offered by previous witches, those who came on stage later had to rack their brains for new blessing content. More than half of the blessing process was over, and the common beautiful qualities of humanity were almost exhausted. Another witch walked to the front of the stage, her mouth twitching, at a loss. No way, my colleagues ahead, leave some blessing space for me. How did you use up all the virtues of humanity? Seeing the witch's bewildered expression on stage, Rhine deliberately coughed twice and, pretending to chat with the queen beside him, said, Thanks to the blessings of the witches, Princess Aurora is definitely the most perfect child in the world, endowed with the most virtues. I think what Princess Aurora needs more now is a blessing to help her ward off external harm and live a safe and happy life. The witch, worthy of being a witch, immediately understood Rhine's meaning and changed the direction of her blessing. Little Princess Aurora, all man-made and natural weapons in the world, swords and arrows, sharp claws and fangs, shall not harm you. Sharp blades cannot leave a scratch on your snow-white skin. The next witch followed suit, mimicking, and bestowed the blessing of, not being harmed by water and fire, extreme heat and extreme cold. Rhine looked at the witches in front, who were applying all sorts of buffs to the little princess, and couldn't help but find it amusing. Those who understood the situation knew this was offering beautiful blessings to the little princess. Those who didn't might think they were creating some ultimate biological weapon. Or, the opportunity to create such an ultimate biological weapon was merely to allow Aurora to live an ordinary, beautiful life like a regular royal princess. It was somewhat a waste of natural resources. In a flash, all 12 witches had offered their blessings. This included the 12th witch, Lilac Fairy, the sister of Violet Fairy, who in the original story had not yet had the chance to offer her blessing. Her gift to the little princess was, good luck in turning misfortune into fortune. Finally, in the Grand Hall, only 2 mages remained who had not yet given their blessings. Black Witch Maleficent. Court Mage Rhine. Confirming that all 12 witches had already offered their blessings before her, the Black Witch smiled. This cold witch, dressed in black, strode to the little princess's cradle and said in a voice so sharp it was almost piercing. Oh, the other witches have all given wonderful gifts. What gift should I give to our beautiful, perfect, healthy, lucky little princess with a heart of gold? The Black Witch dramatically gestured with her hands. Oh, little Princess Aurora. You, endowed with all the virtues of humanity, will surely live through 15 beautiful years of youth. Looks quite normal. The king, whose nerves had been highly strung, finally breathed a sigh of relief upon hearing the Black Witch's blessing. It's stable. Thankfully, nothing went wrong. But, the next second, the Black Witch suddenly raised her voice. When you turn 15, you will prick your finger on a spinning wheel and die on the spot. The Black Witch immediately turned to the king on the throne, her laughter filled with blatant malice. And with the princess, this kingdom itself will die. Oh, king! I curse your daughter and this land. Your beloved daughter will die miserably after being pricked by a spinning wheel. This is a weaving tool, not a man-made or natural weapon. After the little princess's death, the curse covering this land will fully descend, and every noble and commoner in the kingdom will meet the same end. You will be plagued by severe illness. You will cough, bleed, and tremble on the floor. The next day, when you move again, you can only watch as your own hands plunge a knife into your own throat. Your blood will flow out of the houses and into the river, dyeing the water crimson. The streets will no longer have people, the palace lights will no longer shine, and the morning sun will not be able to illuminate this land. In the kingdom's desolate lands, thorns, thistles, and weeds will grow in a terrifying manner. Anyone who tries to step into this cursed land will either be entangled by thistles or tripped by bushes, as if countless hands are firmly grasping them, making it difficult to escape. They will all eventually die in agony. The curse will forever linger over this once prosperous land. Having said that, the Black Witch smiled. She smiled beautifully. With a cold, ruthless beauty. This legendary sorceress, the most skilled in magic among the 13 witches, bowed deeply in the direction of the king. These are all my blessings to little Princess Aurora and your majesty. Silence. The air seemed to solidify. The entire hall fell into a deathly silence. Every prince and noble, every foreign prince and princess, held their breath. What are you doing? The king stood up in a rage. Why? Why? I invited you to this grand banquet, treated you to a lavish feast. Yet you cast a curse on Princess Aurora, on my kingdom. The king shouted, beckoning the soldiers around him. Seize her, seize this ungrateful Black Witch. The soldiers raised their sharp weapons, surrounding the Black Witch. The other 12 witches also looked solemn, raising their wands, cautiously pointing them towards the Black Witch. Ha 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 ha. The Black Witch laughed heartily, her posture disheveled. That's right, my esteemed king, you invited me to the banquet, gave me a lavish dinner, and haven't I repaid you with the best blessing? Smash. The Black Witch tapped her fingertip, and a bolt of lightning struck the table, shattering the golden plate on it. It was the golden plate she had eaten from earlier. The exquisitely carved golden plate shattered, revealing the cheap, silver-white metallic luster within. My esteemed king, I know that you, like everyone else in this kingdom, are unwilling to give me the same treatment as the other 12 witches. In fact, I don't need your recognition at all. What if you are a monarch? Your entire kingdom's army combined is just a bunch of little bugs to me. Looking at the shattered plate on the ground, the king was instantly stunned. The next second, he understood the reason. No, this is a misunderstanding. The craftsman used inferior materials, this plate was supposed to be pure gold. The Black Witch continued to laugh. So what if it's a misunderstanding? Ha 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 ha, what a perfect misunderstanding. I've wanted to do this for a long time. The Black Witch's stern gaze swept over the 12 witches standing ready. I am clearly the most powerful of all the witches, surpassing all of them combined. But you fear me, dread me, slander me in secret, just because I am more excellent, able to wield darker powers that they cannot touch. Now, I have presented my final gift before leaving this kingdom. The curse has been cast, and it cannot be lifted unless I die. Rhine looked at the Black Witch's twisted face and maniacal laughter, and couldn't help but sigh. This was completely a sensitive, neurotic madwoman. Even if the golden plate hadn't been an issue, she might have been enraged by other details. The 12 witches could no longer tolerate the Black Witch's rampant behavior. Don't think you're the only one who can use magic. No matter how powerful you are still only one person. The Violet Fairy, who was leading them, pointed her wand at the Black Witch and loudly declared. Since the curse can be lifted if you die. Then let you atone for your sins here. The king also directed the surrounding soldiers, completely surrounding the Black Witch. Facing the 12 witches and the large group of soldiers who had entered the ceremony, the Black Witch showed no fear. Be honored. You will have the chance to witness my most powerful form with your own eyes. As her words fell, a ghastly green flame ignited on her black cloak. The woman's thin, pale body rapidly expanded and then burst open. Rumble. In an instant, the Black Witch transformed into a giant black dragon. The giant dragon's head touched the ceiling. Its wings flapped, causing the entire palace to tremble, and dust and debris fell. Foreign dignitaries and nobles screamed. They either scattered and fled, or hid under the tables in the palace hall. Rhine did not hesitate, quickly stepping in front of the panicked king and queen. Danger, retreat quickly. Leave this to me. The soldiers shot at the evil dragon, but the arrows struck its black scales like eggs hitting steel, easily deflecting. The 12 witches each cast their signature spells. Some witches pulled out bright mirrors, facing them directly at the black dragon. The mirror surface could suck away the souls of enemies who looked directly at it. Some witches pointed their wands at the black dragon, trying to turn Maleficent into a toad. Some witches sang eerie chants, trying to warp and enchant Maleficent's mind. All these efforts were futile. The giant dragon shrugged its shoulders, easily resisting the magic attempting to affect it. The witches' faces turned pale, their mouths twitching slightly, feeling a profound, heartfelt despair. At this moment, the witches finally understood that even though they were collectively known as the 13 witches of the kingdom, there was an insurmountable chasm between them and this colleague. Maleficent before them was a true legendary magic master, a terrifying existence who could destroy a kingdom on a whim. The black dragon spewed ghastly green flames, instantly engulfing the hall. Large numbers of soldiers were reduced to ashes before they could even scream. The 12 good witches barely protected themselves with magic, retreating repeatedly, looking disheveled, their faces blackened, having long lost their noble, elegant, and unfathomable appearance from earlier. My beloved king, you wouldn't truly believe that this rabble under your command could harm a single hair on me, would you? The black dragon, transformed from Maleficent, laughed wildly. Foolish king, you could have resigned yourself to fate and lived for another decade or so, waiting for the curse to take effect. Since you refuse to wait, why not become my meal now? The next moment, the black dragon flapped its wings powerfully, pouncing towards the throne where the king and queen were, and again spewed ghastly green scorching flames from its mouth. Oh no! The Violet Fairy, leader of the 12 witches, paled in shock, watching the black dragon spew flames, surging towards the throne. She seemed to see that in the next instant, the king, the queen, and the handsome young man beside them would be engulfed by the scorching fire. The queen was almost unconscious from fright. Looking at the green flames about to engulf him, the usually composed king also turned pale, and couldn't help but close his eyes. However, the scorching heat that seemed to consume him did not come. Rhine stepped forward, blocking the king and queen, his arms making graceful arcs in the air. Clear spring water gushed out of nowhere onto the palace floor, and as soon as it touched the flames, it turned into wisps of white mist, stopping the surging inferno. The magnificent carpet instantly came alive, protecting Rhine, the king, and the queen from the scorching steam. The king opened his eyes and slowly recovered when he saw the back of the young man in a magnificent robe. Thankfully, Lord Rhine, this highly skilled magician, was here. Amazing. Seeing Rhine's move, the Black Witch was also a little surprised. The silver-haired boy in front of her looked too young, only about 11 or 12 years old. When she attended the banquet, the Black Witch heard that the boy sitting next to the king was a magician, but given his appearance, she didn't take it seriously at all. I never expected it, old man, you still had a trick up your sleeve. Your royal advisor is such a powerful magician, the Black Witch sneered. Rhine seized the Black Witch's moment of surprise and clapped his hands softly. Clap, clap. Tables, chairs, plates, knives and forks, stone statues, all the objects in the hall seemed to come alive, either running or flying, all rushing towards the Black Witch. Animate. This was the magic Rhine mastered after helping the king and queen fulfill their wish for an heir. While the soldiers, 12 witches, and Maleficent, who had transformed into the Black Witch, were fighting, Rhine had been secretly casting spells, imbuing life into the inanimate objects in the hall, creating a massive number of animated objects soldiers, just waiting for this moment to strike. This consumed most of Rhine's magic power, but it was completely worth it. A large group of animated objects jumped up and down, besieging the Black Witch in the center. Giant stone statues drew their great swords and slashed at the Black Witch, while silver knives and forks tried to pierce the gaps in her dragon scales. As the animated objects fought, Rhine raised his hand again, and pure white light surged from his palm, enveloping the entire hall and flowing into the bodies of the severely wounded soldiers and witches, healing their injuries. Healing spell. The soldiers who had been scattering and fleeing, and the royalty and nobles who had been hiding under tables, but the tables had run away, and were covered in dust, regained their composure. That's great. It's the magic of Sage Rhine. Sage Rhine has restrained the wicked Black Witch. My leg was burned off, wasn't it? It's recovered. Thank you, Lord Rhine. Let's seize this opportunity and attack together. After a brief respite, the 12 witches also exerted their full strength, using all their hidden magic to fight against the terrifying Black Witch alongside the soldiers. How annoying. The Black Witch flapped her wings. The attacks from the animated objects, the kingdom's soldiers, and the witches, while not causing any substantial damage to her, were still bothersome to deal with. She had just unleashed a powerful curse capable of affecting the entire kingdom, and even with a 15-year delay for self-restraint, it had consumed most of her magic power. She now had very little strength left. In such a state, crushing these ants was indeed not an easy task. Moreover, who knew if that little magician, whom she wasn't familiar with, was using his full power? If this Sage Rhine still had reserves, then continuing to fight might result in her getting injured or having to use her trump card. Never mind, the curse has already been cast, why bother fighting? The Black Witch roared, flapping her wings violently, sending all the surrounding animated objects flying. Rumble. The giant dragon crashed through the palace ceiling and flew into the starry sky amidst the flying dust. The Black Witch's laughter echoed in the vast, boundless night sky. The curse has been cast, it is inevitable. Tomorrow, I will leave this dying kingdom. Goodbye, king, and may you die with your precious princess. The king knelt on the ground, looking at the large hole in the palace ceiling, the swirling dust, and the Black Witch disappearing into the depths of the night sky. Helplessness and despair welled up in his heart. Looking around, foreign guests from various countries were fleeing in panic. Many wanted to return to their own countries and inform their homelands not to approach this cursed land anymore. The joy of the previous celebration, the crimson lights, the festive songs, the aroma of the feast, and the fragrance of fine wine, all seemed like an illusion, easily shattered. Why? Why did this happen? The king knelt on the ground, crying out to the sky in pain. Desperate paleness covered the face of the aging monarch. In the cradle, the little princess was awakened by the loud noise, her expression bewildered, not yet knowing what had happened. This newborn princess did not yet know what kind of curse she bore. She showed no fear, nor did she cry. Then, the king, the queen, and the magician Rhine all witnessed a scene they would never forget. The young and innocent Aurora waved her tender little hands towards the brilliant starry sky outside the hole in the palace ceiling. Sleeping Beauty in her swaddling clothes was giggling at the myriad stars. Rhine pulled up his dust-stained cloak and slowly walked behind the king. Although this was a familiar story, to truly experience it firsthand, witnessing everyone's joys and sorrows, was a different feeling altogether, making the young man feel a bit melancholic. Compared to the more popular version of Sleeping Beauty, the curse cast by the Black Witch was far more cruel. It would not only kill the little princess but also bring about the end of the entire kingdom. And the princess piercing her finger with a spindle and dying tragically was merely an incitement for the curse to come true and for disaster to descend, just the prelude to this grand ceremony of destruction. However, it made sense that the curse would be like that. According to the original story's development, it was the 12th witch who used her final blessing opportunity to weaken the curse, changing death to sleep. And even with the curse weakened, after the princess pricked her hand with the spindle, the curse's magic still plunged the entire kingdom into slumber. Afterward, the entire kingdom was also filled with malicious thorns, thistles, and vines, becoming a cursed land that travelers dared not tread. It wasn't until 100 years later that the fated prince broke through the thorns, entered this cursed land, and kissed Sleeping Beauty, finally lifting the curse. Since the weakened curse could make the entire kingdom sleep for 100 years, the original curse could, of course, destroy the entire kingdom. Is this what magic is? Powerful mages can, on a whim, humiliate monarchs and cause mighty kingdoms to crumble. Will I also master such powerful magic in the future? Ryan felt quite emotional. Just now, he had gone all out, yet he hadn't posed any substantial threat to the Black Witch. In fact, the Black Witch was clearly in her most exhausted state, right after casting a powerful curse. If she were at her peak, crushing all of us would probably only take a few seconds. Black Witch Maleficent is indeed far, far more powerful than I am now. As expected of a legendary witch who can easily destroy a kingdom. I wonder how long she has lived. This gap definitely cannot be bridged by just helping 3 or 4 protagonists of Destiny. Ryan sighed softly. The king seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant, his face completely drained of color. He forced himself to stand up, looked at the 12 witches behind him, and almost pleaded. Save my daughter and this kingdom. There are so many of you, and you all possess powerful magic. You must have a way, right? You must be able to break this curse, right? The 12 witches exchanged glances, unsure of what to say for a moment. The Black Witch's magic is 100 times more powerful than ours, her spell is not something we can break. One of the witches said timidly, her voice growing softer and softer until she fell silent. Silence. A deathly silence lingered in the dust-filled, fragmented, and chaotic palace. Whether it was the monarch of a kingdom or the highly skilled witches, all lowered their heads, not uttering a word. Suddenly, Violet Fairy, the leader of the 12 witches, broke the silence. No, there's still a chance. We still have a way. Violet Fairy looked at the silver-haired mage beside her, who wore a pure white cloak and appeared overly young. We still have Sir Rhine. The kingdom's sage, the court's mage, Sir Rhine, has not yet bestowed a blessing upon the little princess. The king looked bewildered, seemingly not understanding Violet Fairy's meaning. At a time like this, he was still thinking about blessings. Princess Aurora wouldn't even live past 15. Violet Fairy spoke with increasing excitement. The curse was cast upon Princess Aurora. When she pricks her finger with the spindle and loses her life, that's when the kingdom's disaster will begin. We can have Sir Rhine bestow a blessing upon the little princess to counteract the curse's magic. The other 11 witches, upon hearing Violet Fairy's words, had their eyes simultaneously fixated, as if they had seen hope. They understood the miraculous power of blessings better than the king. That's right, there's still this method. I almost forgot, Sir Rhine is also an excellent mage. Although all 12 of us have granted blessings, Sir Rhine has not yet bestowed one. The original atmosphere of despair was instantly diluted. Both the witches and the king, whose expressions had been helpless, now showed hope again. The eyes of everyone fell upon Rhine. The king's eyes lit up, as if he had grasped a life-saving straw, and he hastily asked Violet Fairy. So, if Sir Rhine bestows a curse removal blessing upon Princess Aurora, the Black Witch's curse will disappear, right? At the same time, he stared intently at Rhine, who was deep in thought beside him. The boy's small figure, leaning against the wall in contemplation, cast a long shadow under the flickering lamplight. A few minutes ago, this seemingly gentle child had turned the tide and saved everyone. Now, he had once again become everyone's last hope. Violet Fairy shook her head. I'm afraid not, Your Majesty. Even the power of a blessing cannot remove the Black Witch's powerful curse. Every potent curse has only a fixed method of removal. This curse can only be lifted by killing the Black Witch. And Maleficent has just proven that she is far, far too powerful for us, even if we combine our strength. A look of despair once again took over the king's aged face. Violet Fairy quickly added. However, Rhine's blessing can weaken the curse. By modifying some of the curse's wording, we can transform the destined disaster into a solvable crisis. Rhine, who had been silent for a long time, finally spoke. Yes. I still have one opportunity to bestow a blessing upon Her Royal Highness. Fairy, what blessing do you think I should bestow to resist this dark curse? The Violet Fairy lowered her head slightly, pondering for a moment. What kind of blessing could most effectively counter the Black Witch's curse at this moment? Before she could voice her answer, the little magician suddenly mimicked the Violet Fairy's tone, saying in a solemn voice. Princess Aurora, even if your finger is pricked by a spinning wheel, you will not die, but only fall into a deep sleep. Everyone else in the kingdom will also fall into a deep sleep, not death. A kiss from someone who truly loves you will awaken you and break the curse. Under the astonished gaze of the head witch, the silver-haired boy turned to the Violet Fairy. Is this the blessing you suggested I bestow? Yes, that's right, exactly that. The Violet Fairy stammered, momentarily stunned. The witch looked bewildered. Huh, how did you know what I was going to say? I hadn't even said it yet. Wait, no, I hadn't even fully thought it through, and you already thought of it for me. The Violet Fairy felt that the content of the blessing Lord Rhine had given was impeccable. It was exactly what she would have given after careful consideration. She had no doubt that if she were in Rhine's position now, the blessing she offered would definitely be like this. However, as a knowledgeable witch, the Violet Fairy knew that some magicians were skilled in mind reading and prophecy magic, so she didn't think much of it. Perhaps Lord Rhine also had expertise in this area. The Violet Fairy bowed to Rhine, saying sincerely and excitedly, Lord Rhine, please bestow the blessing upon Princess Aurora, using the exact wording you just used. As a benevolent witch, she, like the king, did not wish to see the curse come true. Moreover, the Violet Fairy herself was a member of the kingdom, and thus a target of the curse. The Black Witch herself was the one who cast the curse, she would certainly not be affected after leaving the kingdom. But the Violet Fairy worried that she and the 12 witches, and other residents of the kingdom, even if they left the kingdom, the curse would relentlessly pursue them. At the same time, the king also cheered up. That's right, in addition to Lord Rhine's blessing, as the monarch of this country, I will also strive to prevent the conditions of the curse from being met. I will confiscate all spinning wheels in the kingdom and forbid the princess from leaving the palace, absolutely not allowing my daughter to come into contact with a spinning wheel. As long as there are no spinning wheels, Princess Aurora will not be pricked by one. The Black Witch's curse will certainly not become a reality. Rhine summarized softly. So, everyone's opinion is, I will first bestow the blessing I just spoke of upon Princess Aurora, changing the death brought by the curse to sleep. Then, Your Majesty will confiscate all spinning wheels in the kingdom, starting from preventing the curse's conditions from being met. This way, we achieve double insurance. This is our way of countering the curse, correct? The king and the queen, who was still shaken, along with the 12 witches, all nodded. This sounded like the best, and indeed the only, way to counter the curse. Was there any other better blessing content? Rhine sighed softly, not rushing to bestow the blessing immediately, but instead bowed to the king. Respected Majesty, before I bestow the blessing, do you wish for me to make a prophecy about the future? Do you wish for me to observe the future we will encounter after attempting to counter the curse in the manner described above? After hearing Rhine's words, the queen suddenly remembered that when she first met the little magician, he had made an accurate prophecy. I almost forgot, our court magician, Lord Rhine, is also a prophet skilled in prophecy and knowledgeable about the future. The queen said with surprise in her voice, introducing him to the witches beside her. The witches and the king exchanged glances a few times, then turned to Rhine. Of course, please, Lord Rhine, attempt to make a prophecy. Regarding what was called prophecy, the Violet Fairy, as the head witch, didn't actually care much. She also knew some divination and prophecy techniques, so compared to ordinary people like the king and queen, she herself knew clearly that so-called prophecy and divination were mostly useless. The results obtained from prophecy were generally vague, fragmented words. More often than not, they led to misunderstanding and misleading rather than serving a purpose. Rhine nodded slightly, secretly delighted. He felt a fervent power of desire from the king and queen before him, a craving for the unknown future. He deliberately guided the king and queen to make this request to actively create an opportunity to fulfill their wish, and absorb their willpower. Allow me to unveil the mist of fate and glimpse the truth of the future. The little magician was seen chanting a spell, his body floating slightly. His wide cloak and robe moved without wind, his chin lifted, and his eyes shone with silver light. He looks so powerful, I've never seen this kind of magic, the Violet Fairy secretly marveled. A few seconds later, the young man slowly landed back on the ground, the silver light in his eyes gradually extinguishing. Respected Majesty, I have penetrated the mist of fate and seen the tableau of the future. Please allow me to show it to you all. Rhine's fair hand swept across the silver mirror, and ripples spread out in circles. The king and queen, along with the 12 witches, all leaned forward, watching the scene gradually emerge in the mirror. The witches, including the most knowledgeable Violet Fairy, were slightly surprised by the sight in the mirror. It actually showed future scenes directly. Ordinary prophecies and divinations would be hard-pressed to achieve such a degree, right? Usually, when magicians divine for people, they would rather speak as vaguely as possible, being as mystical as they can be. Of course, Rhine himself knew that the scenes he displayed were mostly based on his understanding of the story's future as a transmigrator. On this basis, he would then add a small amount of magic to supplement reasonable details. As for the magic of his eyes glowing silver, its only purpose was to create visual effects. As for projecting scenes, it was absolutely rare for the magicians of this world, but for Rhine, who had been baptized by 21st century films, he could easily think of it. In the mirror, like a movie playing, scene after scene unfolded. The king issued a decree, confiscating all spinning wheels in the kingdom and then destroying them all. This caused a great deal of resentment among the common people. But this could not change the king's will. The soldiers, fully armed, rushed into houses, pushing down women who were still weaving, knocking over their children who resisted fiercely, and, amidst screams and cries, snatched away the only spinning wheel in the house. To prevent any spinning wheels from still existing among the common people, the king also locked Princess Aurora in a small palace, forbidding her from stepping out of the door. As time passed, the princess grew day by day, and all the blessings of the witches came true on Aurora. She was intelligent and beautiful, gentle in nature, elegant in demeanor, and loved by everyone. She was exceptionally wise, learned at an astonishing speed, and never forgot anything she read. However, Princess Aurora, who embodied all the beautiful qualities in the world, had been unable to even step onto the outdoor grass or play with butterflies since her birth. From the moment she had memories, she had been trapped in a magnificent prison. Aurora's entire life was confined between magnificent marble pillars and dazzling crystal chandeliers. The path from her boudoir to the main hall was her entire world. In the mirror, the teenage Princess Aurora had flowing golden hair that seemed like melted gold, and her emerald eyes were bright as jewels, incredibly beautiful. The queen trembled with excitement, unable to help but cover her mouth. Rhine was moved by the queen's loss of composure. Of course, he didn't know Aurora's exact appearance when she grew up. But too many works had depicted the appearance of Sleeping Beauty when she grew up, including many books, Disney films, and animations. The princess's appearance in the mirror was a mixed, melded, and beautified version of these images, with details adjusted according to the characteristics shown by baby Aurora after receiving the blessings. Rhine also deliberately made the scene in the mirror slightly blurry and pulled the camera further back, so that others could not clearly see all the details of Aurora's facial features. Even if there were subtle differences between Aurora's true appearance when she grew up and the appearance he was now displaying, that would be more than 10 years later. Relying solely on memory, it would be impossible to compare the blurry image shown now with the true appearance more than 10 years later. What's more, once he truly bestowed that blessing, the direction of the Sleeping Beauty story would undergo a complete change. Aurora's temperament and image would inevitably undergo earth-shattering changes. Should I say I really have a talent for being a mystical prophet? I also know how to fool people, Rhine mused to himself. In the mirror, the young girl stood blankly, gazing repeatedly at the people coming and going through the main door, listening to the laughter from outside her world. Her gaze was helpless and profound, like a visitor observing another world. But Aurora did not complain. She knew the cause and effect of the curse, and she knew she carried the fate of a kingdom. She understood her father's decision, and was well aware that that door was a forbidden zone she should never cross. Seeing another group of people walk out the door, heading towards a world she could never set foot in, and disappearing into the distance, the princess merely sighed softly, smiled faintly, and turned back to her room. Outside the mirror, the 12 witches, the king, and the queen all saw this scene, seeing the helpless smile on Princess Aurora's lips. Coupled with the princess's pitifully beautiful face, several witches and the queen couldn't help but be moved, their expressions dimming a little. The perfect and healthy physique, skilled in running, with an astonishing photographic memory, loved by all, and graceful in demeanor, the young girl, at the prime age when she should be exploring the world, was forever confined. For more than a decade, day after day, Her Majesty the Queen, who loved her daughter most deeply, was now in tears. The king saw his wife weeping, his face slightly grave, but he remained firm. There's no need to be sad. Compared to the tragic outcome brought by the curse, the small price Aurora pays is nothing at all. The trigger condition for the curse is Aurora being pricked by a spinning wheel, after which the kingdom will suffer disaster. What we are doing is to prevent the curse from coming true, to allow our daughter and everyone to live. This is just a small, necessary sacrifice. The queen nodded. Of course, she also had the bigger picture in mind. It was just that she had been moved by seeing her daughter's graceful appearance in the future, and for a moment, she felt a little unwilling. Yes. As long as the Black Witch's curse could be prevented from coming true, any price was worth it. The scene in the mirror continued to play out. The thing that interested Princess Aurora most was listening to the learned magician Rhine and other scholars, every night before bed, turning pages and telling stories of the outside world. Whenever a bedtime story ended and the lights were extinguished, the little princess would gaze at the shimmering starlit river outside her window. Would falling down a rabbit hole truly lead to a wonderland beyond this world? Were there really mermaids in the deep ocean? Were the giant castles above the clouds just legends or real? Father, mother, as soon as my 15th birthday passes, the curse will be lifted, and I'll be able to go out into the world, right? Beside her pillow, the young girl's jewel-like eyes were filled with hope. This was a promise she had received since she first had memories. Tomorrow is my birthday. Aurora's tone was filled with undisguised excitement. It was the day she had been waiting for through thousands of days and nights since her birth. Father, mother, magician Rhine, thank you all. After my birthday tomorrow, the curse will be lifted. Then, I want to go out and see. There are so many things I want to see, so many places I want to go. I want to see if what the books say is true. The mirror's image froze on the young girl's smile, full of infinite longing for the future. The scene then shifted to the next shot. Aurora was celebrating her 15th birthday. The king saw this scene, and the stone hanging in his heart slowly settled. It seemed his precautionary measures had indeed been effective. As long as he confiscated all the spinning wheels in the entire kingdom and imprisoned the princess, theoretically eliminating all possibility of Aurora touching a spinning wheel, he could prevent the prophecy from coming true. Although I imprisoned my daughter for over a decade and the confiscation of spinning wheels across the country caused discontent, it was completely worth it. The aged monarch's white beard trembled. Seeing the king's excited look, Rhine sighed softly, a feeling of emotion welling up in his heart. The king was still too naive. How could a so-called prophecy be avoided in such a simple way? In many myths and fairy tales, all attempts to resist prophecy with human effort only ended up causing the prophecy to fulfill itself. Your Majesty. Conversely, the expressions of the several witches were far from as relaxed as the king's. They were true spellcasters who understood magic, and vaguely, they could sense something ominous. The next second, the scene in the mirror suddenly changed. After the birthday celebration ended, before the midnight bells, the little princess, still adhering to the last half-hour curfew, wandered through the palace, moving through the countless rooms, large and small, that she had seen hundreds of thousands of times since birth. Finally, she came to an ancient palace tower. Inside the tower was a very narrow staircase, at the end of which was a door, with a golden key inserted into it. Strange, I don't think I've ever walked here before. With a puzzled look, Aurora turned the golden key, and the door immediately sprang open. An old woman sat inside, busy spinning. The princess had never seen a weaving tool before and asked in confusion. Hey, old woman, hello. What are you doing? Spinning, the old woman replied. This little thing spins so interestingly. Can I see it? Saying this, Aurora curiously stepped forward, wanting to pick up the spinning wheel and spin. Seeing this scene, the queen screamed loudly, reaching out her hand and pressing it against the silver mirror in Rhine's hand. No, don't. Daughter, don't go near that thing. The king also turned pale, greatly alarmed. Wait, no. But how could Aurora in the mirror hear the voices of her parents outside the mirror? In the despairing and terrified eyes of her parents, Aurora touched the spinning wheel and immediately pricked her finger. A spinning wheel was not a weapon, so the blessing that, man-made and natural weapons cannot harm Aurora, was naturally ineffective. The next second, the golden-haired girl fell to the ground, losing consciousness. The curse had come true. However, the blessing that magician Rhine had once bestowed also took effect. The princess did not die, but merely fell into a deep sleep, a dreamless slumber. The king and queen rushed back at this moment. As soon as they entered the hall, they also fell asleep. The horses in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons on the roof, the flies on the wall, all fell asleep as well. Even the fire in the hearth stopped burning and went to sleep. The roasting meat stopped sizzling, everything became still, all falling into a deep slumber. The sleeping spell enveloped the entire kingdom, plunging every resident of the kingdom into eternal sleep. Soon, a large hedge of thorns grew over the kingdom's land. Year after year, the wild plants grew taller and denser, eventually completely covering the palace, even obscuring the roof and chimneys. 10 years passed. 20 years passed. 50 years passed. A legend spread about this kingdom, a legend of a beautiful sleeping princess. From then on, many princes came to explore, hacking their way through the thorns to try and reach the palace, but none succeeded. Every brave soul who stepped into this cursed land was either entangled by the thorns or tripped by the bushes, as if countless hands firmly held them, making it impossible to escape. They all eventually died in agony. Outside the mirror, the king watched his kingdom being ruled by thorns and thistles, becoming a cursed land that no one dared to set foot in, and he felt utterly weak and helpless. Why? Why couldn't the curse be stopped? Why did a staircase and rooms I'd never seen before appear in my palace? Why did a spinning old woman appear out of thin air? All of this was simply too illogical. The monarch of the kingdom, at this moment, no longer looked like a king, roaring in distress, covering his face and weeping. As if he had truly experienced decades of time just now. As if all the disasters had already occurred. Violet Fairy gently patted the king's shoulder and comforted him. No, your majesty, this is not your fault. A fated curse, like a prophecy, is difficult to change the outcome, no matter how much effort is put in. Seeing that the king no longer wished to look at the image in the mirror, Rhine also gently wiped his small hand across the mirror, erasing the image. As for the distant future, he could not be certain. If it followed the most popular version of Sleeping Beauty on the market, exactly 100 years after the princess fell into slumber, a handsome prince would brave thorns and thistles, successfully kiss the princess, and break the spell. However, even Rhine was not entirely sure if, in this world, the story would perfectly follow the happy ending described above. After all, there were too many circulating versions of fairy tales. For example, in the more primitive, Sleeping Beauty, prototype, Sun, Moon, and Talia, the subsequent story involved rape and cannibalism, which was truly unsuitable for children. The one who awakened the princess was not a prince, but the rapist king of a neighboring country. The moment he retracted the mirror, Rhine clearly felt the influx of wish power into his soul, and his own magic increased significantly. By relying on a transmigrator's foresight, he successfully fulfilled the king and queen's wish to see the future. Even if the future was not beautiful. When Rhine fulfilled this wish, he also gained a trace of true prophetic power. Using this new power, Rhine could perceive distant or future scenes, though the information was very vague unless he obtained a suitable medium. As early as when he was providing free medical treatment, Rhine discovered that repeatedly fulfilling the same person's wish would greatly diminish its effectiveness. Generally, only the first 1 or 2 times had significant results. Now that Rhine had fulfilled the king and queen's wishes twice, he needed to find other protagonists of fate. The queen looked at the little magician, who was silently putting away the silver mirror, and was already sobbing uncontrollably. Your Excellency Rhine, is this our destined fate? Can we not use any method to break the curse, to prevent this misfortune from arriving? Under everyone's astonished gazes, Rhine shook his head. No, according to the principles of magic, every curse has a way to be lifted, otherwise, it could not have been cast in the first place. When Black Witch Maleficent cast the curse, she already set the conditions for its removal. As long as we meet this condition, we can lift the curse without waiting until Her Royal Highness the Princess's 15th birthday. The 12 witches, as well as the king and queen, fell silent simultaneously. They, of course, knew what the method to completely remove the curse from the little princess was. Killing Black Witch would lift the curse. But Black Witch's magic is too powerful, we cannot possibly fight her. The king wailed. He immediately thought of another possibility and asked tentatively. Could it be, Your Excellency Rhine, that you mean you are capable of defeating Black Witch Maleficent? Could it be that during the previous battle, Rhine still had unused trump cards hidden? Was he confident in himself to propose this suggestion? Rhine smiled faintly and replied with certainty. No. The youth continued. Tonight, we were fighting Maleficent, who had just finished casting a powerful curse. If we challenge Black Witch Maleficent later, she will only be more powerful and more invincible than she was tonight. The king's mouth twitched, and his face instantly turned ugly. Since Black Witch was so powerful as to be almost invincible, what was the point of saying this? Who could kill her? He had known before that Black Witch Maleficent was more formidable than the other 12 witches, but he had not expected the difference between them to be as vast as a chasm. The 12 witches also had solemn expressions, like still water. In the previous battle, the giant dragon that Black Witch transformed into left a deep impression on them. Even among spellcasters who wield magic, distort nature, and reshape reality, the disparity between them was despair-inducing. Even if the entire kingdom's army gathered together, facing such an inhuman beast, their morale would instantly collapse. Numbers alone simply could not defeat a dragon. Your Majesty. Scanning the gloomy faces of everyone, the little magician pulled up his white gold robe and bowed lightly to the king. Indeed, with my own strength and the kingdom's soldiers, it is impossible to defeat the giant dragon that Black Witch transformed into. However, a blessed warrior can do it. After studying magic books, Rhine gained a deep understanding of the transcendent powers in this world. Not only could magicians use wondrous magic, but powerful warriors could also train their bodies to be far stronger than those of earthlings. Rhine raised his voice. Your Majesty, I know of such a warrior, braver and more intelligent than every knight under your command. This warrior was bathed in powerful magic at birth, possesses extraordinary physique, is impervious to blades and spears, is proficient in every sword art in the world, skilled with every weapon, armor, and shield, and may even understand a little magic. When this warrior draws their treasured sword, only gods can rival them in swordsmanship. When they draw their bowstring, arrows can traverse half the kingdom to pierce their target. When this warrior rides a magnificent horse across the battlefield, even a scattered army will yield to their charisma and obey their commands. When this warrior sings a battle song before a routed army, even an undisciplined force will reassemble, willing to die for them. I believe such a warrior can lead your Majesty's army, kill Black Witch, and lift the curse from its root. The king and queen were stunned after hearing Rhine's words. The 12 witches were all stunned. Especially Violet Fairy, the leader of the 12 witches, she was extremely surprised. This seemingly young magician also knew such a brave warrior. Recalling that Rhine had previously displayed magic beyond her own, Violet Fairy suspected that the boy in front of her was not as young as he seemed. Could he be an old wizard who had lived for centuries pretending to be young? Your Excellency Rhine, is what you said true? So you know such a powerful warrior. Why didn't you say so earlier? The king's eyes widened, full of surprise and uncertainty. This white-haired old man no longer had any of a king's majesty. He grasped this last straw of hope, clutching Rhine's lapels, and excitedly asked. Please tell me, Your Excellency Rhine, where is that warrior? Which kingdom is he in now? I want to hire him, even if it means emptying all the gold in the entire national treasury. Oh, by the way, I can also marry my daughter to him and let him be the new master of the kingdom. I am willing to offer the entire kingdom as a gift to him, as long as he can help me defeat Black Witch and lift the curse. Rhine's expression was as usual. He was silent for a moment, then said lightly. Your Majesty, I confirm to you, do you truly wish to see this warrior, and are willing to pay any price, even letting him become the future master of the kingdom? The king paused for half a second upon hearing the question. Then, this increasingly weathered old man nodded firmly, his eyes full of emptiness. If the curse could not be lifted, the kingdom would be destroyed anyway, so what was the point? Rhine smiled. Respected Majesty, since you have made up your mind, let me take you now to see that warrior. Under the gaze of the kingdom's monarch, the queen, and the witches, Rhine strode forward. 1 step, 2 steps, the young magician walked to the little princess's cradle. Following the blessings of the 12 witches, Rhine spread his arms and bestowed the 13th and final blessing upon the sleeping beauty, in the swaddling clothes. Princess Aurora, the blessed one who has gathered 12 blessings. I bestow upon you 3 gifts: the talent for combat, indomitable courage, and the power to uphold justice. I bless you to become the great warrior I just described, to defeat Black Witch Maleficent, and to personally break the curse upon you. Rhine turned gently. Above, is the blessing I give to Princess Aurora. Behind him, in the cradle and swaddling clothes, a light so brilliant that it made one unable to open their eyes bloomed, signifying that the blessing had been bestowed. A deathly silence. Whether it was the king and queen, the princess's parents, or the 12 witches, they were all dumbfounded at this moment, as if they had turned into statues. They couldn't be blamed for being foolish and not thinking in this direction. It was simply that Rhine's actions completely overturned their usual modes of thinking as fairy tale characters. Is this a blessing usually given to a princess? They had never even heard of similar examples. Rhine looked natural, as if he had just done something that was a matter of course. It was everyone's astonishment that made him a bit speechless. Wasn't what he did a logical progression? Now, the only resource his side had that could potentially counter Black Witch was the last chance to bless Aurora. Blessings, like curses, have a self-fulfilling nature at the causality level. Since Black Witch could cast an inescapable curse, his side could also use this point to preset a good future with a blessing. Compared to a passive defensive blessing like, the princess will not die, only fall into a deep sleep, wouldn't it be 100 times better to simply set in the blessing that, the princess will kill Black Witch and lift the curse? The king recovered from his shock and asked with surprise and doubt. Your Excellency Rhine, what is this? Rhine smiled slightly and explained in detail. Respected Majesty, the future Princess Aurora is the perfect warrior I just spoke of. The witch's blessings have bestowed all positive human qualities upon Princess Aurora. Princess Aurora has been blessed with a healthy body that is never sick or tired, thus she can become the most valiant warrior. Princess Aurora has been blessed with an eidetic memory and astonishing learning talent, easily mastering peak swordsmanship, and even magic. Princess Aurora has been blessed with a captivating voice and charm that enthralls all beings, thus she can become a commander whose soldiers would follow her to death, a shining banner among countless armies. If she is present, morale will surely be high. If she does not fall, the army will not collapse. Her Highness also has the blessing of being impervious to swords and fire and water. Only she can remain unharmed by a wicked dragon's flames and plunge a sharp blade into the dragon's heart. Coupled with the blessing I just bestowed, Her Highness Aurora will certainly become the kingdom's most excellent warrior, kill Black Witch Maleficent, and personally lift the curse of being pricked by a spindle at 15 years old. The king paused for a moment, carefully recalling the specific details of the so-called warrior that Rhine had just described. It indeed perfectly corresponded to every blessing the witches had previously bestowed upon the princess. Although he found it unexpectedly reasonable, the king still couldn't help but roar in his heart. This works too. After a series of psychological clashes, the king, still in shock, felt a hint of relief. He had already made up his mind to bestow the kingdom upon a brave warrior he had never met. Now, it seemed, since it was for his own child, wouldn't it be better than giving it to an unknown outsider? Withdrawing his gaze from the king, Rhine rolled his eyes at the witches who were still in a state of astonishment. What? The blessings of invulnerability to blades and immunity to fire and water, weren't those given by you? What's there to be surprised about? Rhine cleared his throat twice, then continued. Today, the blessing I bestowed upon Princess Aurora must be kept absolutely secret by everyone. After Black Witch Maleficent leaves the kingdom, it's not impossible for her to continue monitoring the curse's development. If Black Witch knew that we created a warrior who would kill her with a blessing, she would definitely try to hinder the blessing's fulfillment. The power of blessings is ultimately limited. We cannot simply do nothing and wait for the prophecy to automatically come true. We must actively work to bring it about. As early as when everyone was discussing what blessing to bestow, Rhine had dismissed the nearby soldiers and attendants, ensuring that only the king, queen, and witches knew the content of the blessing. Rhine had also considered bestowing an exaggerated blessing like omniscience and omnipotence. However, the power of blessings has its limits. It couldn't even remove one of Black Witch's curses, so it was naturally impossible to directly grant power exceeding Black Witch's. Thus, he tailored this blessing to emphasize talent and the direction of destiny. Rhine then turned to the king. To ensure the blessing is successfully realized, there are 3 more matters that require His Majesty's trouble. The king was indeed a king, he had by now accepted the somewhat absurd reality. Please instruct me, Sir Rhine. This monarch of the kingdom might not have realized it himself, but after a series of events, he had subtly come to view this little magician before him as his sole reliance and hope at this moment. Therefore, when Rhine offered advice, he naturally felt it should be followed. Rhine slowly said, "First is the first matter. Please, King, seal off the news of tonight. The people of the kingdom must not know that this land has been cursed by Black Witch and will face destruction in more than 10 years. Once the news leaks, the entire kingdom will surely fall into panic. Whether they are powerful nobles or wealthy merchants, as long as they have the opportunity, everyone will desperately flee this cursed land. His Majesty's court will forever lack wise ministers, His Majesty's army will no longer have brave fighting soldiers, and the kingdom's land will see no diligent farming peasants. In this way, the kingdom will be a kingdom in name only before the curse even descends." Hearing Rhine's reminder, the king nodded slightly. This was indeed a huge hidden danger. But, could this curse be avoided by escaping the kingdom? If so, seeming to understand what the king was thinking again, the young man's watery eyes dimmed slightly, and he sighed softly. "I have just performed a divination using the princess as a medium, confirming the nature of the curse. Black Witch Maleficent's curse cannot be avoided even by escaping the kingdom. But even if His Majesty says so, people may not believe it, only thinking it's a trick by those in power. Our goal is to lift the curse. The kingdom cannot collapse under the curse named fear, before the witch's curse even descends." When Rhine said this, several witches' expressions clearly changed slightly. His gaze swept over the witches, and Rhine continued the previous topic. "Next is the second matter. Please, Your Majesty, pretend that I have never shown you the future, nor have I bestowed this special blessing upon Princess Aurora. Do everything according to His Majesty's original plan, including confiscating spinning wheels from the common folk, and creating the false impression that Princess Aurora is confined to the palace. And I and the 12 witches will take Princess Aurora, leave the palace, and before the day of the curse arrives, train her to become a king capable of sitting on the throne and a warrior capable of defeating a dragon." So, Rhine finished explaining his plan in detail. The king accepted without objection, though the queen was somewhat sorrowful. The young man then continued. "Next is the third matter. From now on, I will take princess and leave the palace for a long time, until I raise her into a brave warrior who can stand on her own. During this time, please trouble His Majesty to spread my legend, which can be embellished and exaggerated. Before I became a court magician, I had already used magic potions and spells to heal over 1,000 patients, but the scale of influence was still far from enough. Moreover, the legend I need now must include more important details. These legendary stories should emphasize that there is a magician in the kingdom who can grant wishes. If one holds a sufficiently fervent wish in their heart and recites the name from the legend, it is possible for their wishes to come true and their desires to be realized. This name is Sage Beyond the World, Prophet who knows the future, Wizard of Miracles and Wishes." Hearing Lord Rhine's request, not only was the king confused, but even the 12 witches, who were proficient in magic, were equally perplexed. Defining a multi-stage title for others to recite, was this some kind of ritual? However, it seemed that this story of wishes being granted by reciting a name did indeed have a mysterious charm to it. "Of course, no problem, this is effortless. Lord Rhine, everything as you wish." The king did not refuse this request. It was incredibly simple for him. Lord Rhine smiled and thanked the king. This was also a use of the power of prophecy that he had invented. The inspiration naturally came from novels. Unlike other magicians in this world, I have many novel ideas from another world, another era. As I fulfill more wishes and receive more supernatural rewards, elements from Earth's entertainment works can be replicated one by one. Thinking of this, Lord Rhine couldn't help but feel a bit of anticipation. After the battle with Black Witch, Lord Rhine deeply realized that compared to the truly powerful magicians in this world, he still had a long way to go. That night, the king's soldiers stormed into the old craftsman's residence. They were under orders to arrest the fraudulent craftsman and sentence him to hanging. However, when they broke open the door, they found that the old craftsman had already hanged himself from the rafters. Upon learning of the tragic situation at the banquet, the old craftsman committed suicide out of fear of punishment. The old craftsman left a suicide note, pleading for the king and sage Lord Rhine's mercy, asking them to spare his family, including his wife and his brother Oz, who worked at the circus. In the blink of an eye, several weeks had passed since the great battle in the palace. The version of this event circulating among the people had become as follows. The notorious Black Witch Maleficent was invited to Princess Aurora's baptism ceremony but suddenly became enraged and went mad at the banquet, attacking the king's guards and causing many soldier casualties. Fortunately, the court's magic advisor, the kingdom's sage, great magician Lord Rhine, possessed immense power and protected the king and queen, keeping them safe and sound. This court magician also led the 12 witches, turning the tide and repelling Maleficent. Now, Black Witch Maleficent was suspected of having fled to another country. As for the crucial fact that the witch cursed the little princess and even the entire kingdom, it was intentionally concealed. The sun rose as usual. No one knew that the shadow of death had already enveloped the entire kingdom's sky. During this time, another magical legend began to circulate among taverns and bonfires. Have you heard the story of the wish magician? Could it be true? Please, Jerry, you're not a 3-year-old child anymore. How could such a fairy tale be true? But I heard someone say that the magician in the story who can grant wishes is great magician Lord Rhine, who once treated thousands of patients in the southern region and later became the kingdom's sage. It's normal for a story to have a real-life prototype. Besides, as a distinguished court magician now, how could Lord Rhine possibly listen to the wishes of commoners like us? The versions of the legend varied widely, but all revolved around a mysterious magician boy who could grant people's wishes. And almost every circulating version would mention a strange name. It was said that truly desperate children, when starving and cold, had recited the corresponding name and made a wish, and soon after, a colorful bird brought her bread and water. After a few instances of fulfillment, this legend spread rapidly, becoming a bedtime story for many children and even showing a tendency to spread beyond the kingdom. But most people who made wishes with a just trying it out attitude did not witness any miracles. Some doubted the truth of the legend, while others believed that only particularly sincere wishes had a small chance of being answered. During this time, Oz was not in a good state. The circus's balloon pilot and star magician was constantly anxious and distracted. Oz, have you run into some big trouble? I have a suggestion, do you want to hear it? A colleague from the circus comforted Oz, who was looking pale. No, no. Let me be alone. Oz waved his hand, dismissing his colleague. Only Oz knew that his fear couldn't be shared with outsiders. A few days ago, his elder brother, the old craftsman who had served the court for many years, committed suicide out of fear of punishment because he had adulterated the gold plate. Even more terrifying, according to the rumors Oz had heard, the adulteration of the gold plate seemed to be the reason Black Witch Maleficent suddenly attacked at the princess's baptism ceremony. It's over, it's over. My brother provoked Black Witch, which led to this disaster. What's even more terrifying is that my brother seems to have gotten the idea to commit fraud because of my unintentional teasing. If the king finds out that this matter is related to me, I will surely lose my life. No, even if His Majesty doesn't find out, he might still take his anger out on me. The more Oz thought about it, the more terrified he became, trembling and on the verge of tears. Mr. Oz, although I don't know what big trouble you're in, I have a suggestion. You can try making a wish to the magician from the recent legends. The legend says that only particularly strong wishes might be fulfilled. Given your current state, perhaps making a wish will actually work. The colleague who had been dismissed earlier somehow came back again, poking his head out from the doorframe, and suggested, "Make a wish to the legendary magician." Oz was startled, his eyes gleaming slightly. He had also heard the legend of the wish magician recently. It's free anyway, so why not try? But the next second, Oz dismissed the idea. What a joke. The prototype of this legend, it was said, was the kingdom's only sage, the king's advisor, the court's great magician, Lord Rhine. He had offended the king. How desperate would he have to be to pray to the king's advisor, the court magician Lord Rhine? If this great magician could really hear my prayers from afar, it would be merciful if he didn't strike me dead with a bolt of lightning. Oz's heart was dead, his expression gloomy, his face filled with a bleak sorrow. As the saying goes, what you think about during the day, you dream about at night. That night, Oz didn't sleep soundly at all. He dreamed that the king's soldiers came to arrest him, and he would be sentenced to hanging, hanged alive. In the terrifying nightmare, a crying Oz, with a desperate times call for desperate measures attitude, recited the name from the legendary story. Sage beyond the world, prophet who knows the future, wizard of miracles and wishes. Please, I want to live, to escape this kingdom safely. As Oz in the dream recited these words, Oz in the real world also uttered the same dream talk. On the distant road, Lord Rhine, who had packed his belongings and left the palace with Princess Aurora, was halfway on his journey. He heard the distant prayer from the bumpy carriage. Thanks for watching.